for those that are listening, who are you?
My name is Alfonso Portillo, Vice President of Design and Construction for Yondr.
So who's Yondr?
Yondr is an owner-developer. So we do, and started with them 3.5 months ago now.
So let's take it back to the beginning and peel this back. So I have the privilege of knowing you, and I met you early in my career. I have a interesting story to share with you that I think I may have on that last trip that we were on, but we may not have been in the right state when I told you, so there's a good chance you don't remember. So I'll share again.
Fair enough.
But where are you from?
El Paso. Oh, I was born in Chihuahua, Mexico.
Whoa. Where's that at?
Just about 3 hours south of El Paso.
Okay. And what's the name of the town?
Chihuahua.
Chihuahua?
It's
like the dog?
Chihuahua, yeah. It's the capital. It's the city of, the city is Chihuahua in the state of Chihuahua, which Chihuahua is the border state to El Paso.
Okay. So you gotta be a pretty big badass if you grew up in that place.
You know, I didn't grow up there. I came to the States as a baby. My parents were older when they had me. My mom was in her late 40s.
Are you the oldest?
I'm the youngest.
Of
and so my mom had already had, I was her fourth. They had a baby that was born that was also ironically named Alfonso Portillo 2 years before me. And he died a couple of days after being born in El Paso.
Oh, wow.
So they wanted to try again, and they got pregnant with me. And my dad was in his early 50s. And my mom, during pregnancy, had a really, really high-risk pregnancy.
Because of her age?
Because of her age. And then she also had a medical condition to where I actually don't know what it is, but I was basically a risk to her health. And so doctors here recommend that she go through an abortion.
Oh, no kidding.
And so my mom was kind of dead set against it. And she talked to my dad about like, hey, my mom and dad are both from Mexico. And she's like, I want to go talk to my doctor. And if they say the same thing, then we'll go through with it. So they went down there, and they were open to the conversation of having her go through the pregnancy. Part of the agreement was that she stay there, and
just in case of complication,
almost on bed rest. And so I was premature. I think I was born at like 6.5, 7 months.
No kidding.
It was a pretty intense birth from the stories that I've heard, but everything turned out fine. My mom was healthy, and they brought me to the States as a baby. Like my first green card, if you will, was like a baby. So I don't really.
So your parents lived in America.
They did in El Paso.
And then they went. Now were they citizens?
My mom was.
Okay.
My dad had not. I don't think my dad became a citizen until the late 80s, and so I was probably 4 or 5 when he became a citizen. So,
and then
my mom was already a citizen at the time.
And then they went down to Mexico to have you.
Yeah.
And you were the last one?
I was the last one, yeah.
Okay.
So all of my, except for the oldest brother, the 2 in the middle were born here. Oh. So Roger was born in El Paso, and Lloyd was born in California.
How much older is Roger?
5.
Gotcha.
And Lloyd's 10. And then the oldest, Luis, is 20 years older than me.
No kidding.
Yeah. So he has like his son, for example, and his daughter's about 5 or 6 years younger than me. And then his son's 23, 24. So
where does he live?
14. Hey, he's just finishing his master's at Stanford.
No kidding.
So he finishes in June, and he already has a job lined up, and he's ready to go, man.
What is it about like those migrating, like your family culture moves here and they make the most out of like, look at you, look at your brothers, look at your brother's he's going to Stanford, but like they got to be pretty proud. That's the American dream, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, it's kind of one of those, like, I didn't have a, hey, man, yeah, this is good.
Hey, by the way, thank you. Thanks for making the time to come to Austin and spend some time with me.
Of course, this is great.
When we talked, you were telling
me
about
having me.
Are you kidding me? Like, obviously I have a community that I want to serve. I mean, the community that we serve really helps support the industry that we both serve, right? My community is based on my blood, then your community is based on your blood. And when you were sharing with me the reach that you wanted to make into the Hispanic community, I was like, how can I help you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I would love to be able to contribute to that. And that's what we did this podcast thing for. So I know that you're super busy because I know what you guys are like. This is probably the last place you need to be right now, especially at the turn of the end of the year. But I do think that what you're going to share, you know, based on what you've shared with me in the past, should hopefully be a nice light or a beacon for some of these other folks that can maybe follow in your footsteps, because you have a pretty amazing story.
Anything I can do to help, I'm excited about. And that's honestly what I'm passionate about. So it works out.
And it radiates, I think, which is why I'm like, people that have a purpose and people that have a community that are trying to serve, that's infectious. Like, I want to be around those people. right? Because it helps feed me on what I'm trying to do. It inspires me to do what we're trying to do. Because it's tough, man. Sometimes I'm not saying it's a thankless thing, but it's the right thing, and, I'm going to be back and forth and take you back and forth as we discover more on things.
Yeah,
So just
absolutely.
bear with me.
No, I'm here for the ride. Let's do this.
We'll have a good time. So, I want to go back again because understanding where you came from, like that's a pretty complicated way to start your life, it sounds like. And that's probably made your family pretty tight as a byproduct of going through,
100%.
shared suffering really brings people together. When you made it back to the States though, like how did you get to business as usual? Because you were a preemie. So like, were you had to stay down there for a few months before you could travel or?
I don't really remember, honestly. For as far as my childhood, I was pretty normal childhood. My mom and dad had their own business. So
What they do?
They had a rock shop. And so
that's right.
my parents would import gems and lapidary and fossils and all sorts of things from Mexico into the U.S. And this was before NAFTA. And so they had all the connections, and my dad started it before he was married to my mom. And when we got with my mom, it just turned into a business. And so for the longest time, they would do they would basically do trade shows where they sell, and most of your people you're selling to are local rock shop owners that are buying. So my parents were the wholesalers. So they would do this round of shows throughout the U.S.
And this is how long ago?
Oh man,
Before the internet?
Before I was born to probably until I was middle school. So,
but I mean, the resources you had to
late
get your product to
80s
market is.
Yeah, late 80s to early 2000s probably is when they did this.
I got you.
And so I grew up before school traveling with them to all the trade shows. And so it was normal for me to be in a weekend here, a weekend there. And they would set up on a Thursday, and then the show was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and they would sell. And then we'd pack everything up and go to the next trade show. When I started school, they were still doing that. But you got to remember, my brother was 20 years older than me, and then Lloyd was 10 years older than me. So they would go and do the trade show and be gone, 200 days a year. And so I grew up with Nanny and then my older brothers.
Rogers? Yeah.
Roger was 5 years older, and he went to private school or military school in high school. So like I remember a little bit of elementary, not a lot. And then by the time I started middle school, Roger was already in high school.
Oh.
And he was in New Mexico military, so he wasn't even there.
Yeah.
But when he would come visit, and so I grew up with a nanny and my oldest brother, probably the most. And then my parents would come, obviously, as they were able to, until right after NAFTA, and then 9/11 happened, and so a lot of the tourist economy dried up a little bit, and that really affected my parents' business. And so they stopped doing the rock shop, and my dad started doing like just random things to make a living. He eventually, this is a pretty cool story, he eventually got into, he got his license to drive ammunition for the military.
Oh, nice.
Because we lived there in El Paso in the Fort Bliss. And so you got to think about, my dad was in his late 60s, early 70s at the time, was only probably about third or fourth grade education when he came to the States. So he taught himself like how to
read,
how to do all this, passed the test to become a licensed ammunition handler in English, and passed the test, became a driver. And he did that until he passed. He passed away from pancreatic cancer.
Sorry to hear that.
Pretty cool story, like for just the grit of like how to.
It's the American story. Yeah.
So for us, it was like if my dad's doing that, for us to have the opportunity to be here, like we just we got to figure it out. And so by that point, me being the youngest, like I had the benefit of seeing all my older brothers kind of go through all their trials and tribulations and like what to do and what not to do. And so as I was coming up, like I had 3 examples of like how to get by and like their support. And so
I had the same. I have older brothers, so I was able to watch. It's a big benefit to that.
Oh, it's huge. Like I remember being in college, like I would call at the end of every semester, you always kind of run through like you run out of your housing and the dining budget. And so like everything's paid for as long as you can make everything last a year.
Yeah.
And so I always came up to the last like month or two, and you're like eating hot dogs and ramen. And I remember I would call like a brother a month. Be like, all right, it's
I need some.
I got like 3 months left. So in March, I'm calling the oldest.
Smart.
Hey man, I need like $300 for the month. Here's what I need. I don't need anything else. Oh yeah, no questions. But I guess I was so proud and like didn't want to ask. Then the next month I'd be like, I'm calling Lloyd. Hey Lloyd, I need And that's how you get by. And then summer would come in, I'd work an internship. Then the next year, beginning of the year, you have everything you need. And you get to that second semester, March, April timeframe, and you're like, oh shit, all right, I got to figure out how to get by.
You got to hustle, man. You got to learn how to hustle.
Got to make it. But having them always as like a lifeline, I think for me was huge. I had a safety net when they didn't, and so it's such a big, it's a big difference, man.
It's not just that. I mean, now you have the benefit of sitting front row while they're being taught lessons at an older age.
100%.
That's what I had. Like I didn't. That knife cuts both ways. I learned though too, right? So like when my brothers would go out and do things, kind of break the law, not break the law, break the rules. You know, parents get better over time, right? So by the time I was there, my parents had already seen my brothers already the shit they got away with. So like, I wasn't going to be able to get away with a lot of things anyway, because I feel like they were wise to stuff now. They got the scars and the lessons that they learned too. You know, we parents are learning along the way. So I did have the benefit of having brothers that kind of went through the wall first, so I didn't have to get as bloody. But I also had much more proficient, you know, oversight from parents that were learning their lessons too, you know. So it was about a balance. But
yeah, no, I mean, I think my brothers were, I think, more just as influential in my growing up and like my path as my parents were. Like they were.
Is that a cultural thing? Because
I think it's probably culture. I think it's probably also the age difference. I mean, in a lot of ways, you gotta imagine my brother was 20. The oldest brother was 20 years older than me.
And does he still have, I mean, did he have the patience for you when you're like...
Yeah, no. I mean, he was going through his things. He was going through, I mean, he was getting married and having kids and having a family and doing his thing. But absolutely, I mean, I was his youngest brother.
And he was invested.
But in a lot of ways, I think he was more of a father too, because in a lot of ways, my parents would travel and do their trade show thing. And so he would go talk to parents, to my teachers at teacher conferences, and like sometimes they would even think he was my dad because he was 20. I mean, he
in theory, he could have been.
So he was just as invested, and so it's funny. Like I don't think I got to the point where I could have like a brother conversation with my brothers until probably after I graduated college. Honestly,
why is that? You just want to expose yourself to
out of respect. Like I had that like I always, you know how like when you're growing up, like you want to always do good by your parents, and
sure.
Like I had that perception. I didn't have they're my brothers and I'm just gonna fuck around with them.
Yeah, they were
I had I need to
mentors.
make them proud, and I need to, and so I just remember like I remember when I got married, when the bachelor party, my brothers came, and that was like one of the first times like I'm actually like drinking with them, and I'm actually going out to like a club with them, which was kind of cool. And so now very different. Like we have a very open relationship. We talk about everything. I mentor their kids.
Oh, that's awesome.
So in a lot of ways, like it's pretty cool. But yeah, like growing up, they had just as much of an influence on as my parents is probably. Now looking back, as my parents did on me growing up.
You guys still pretty close?
Oh yeah.
Were they spread out throughout? I know
the oldest brother's in Chicago, and Lloyd's in El Paso.
What's your brother in Chicago? Isn't he like what is he?
Luis.
But what's he do?
He owns. So he went to medical school.
Okay.
He started a company, got bought. Now he bought himself back out. So he owns a firm that specializes in surgical assistance for hospitals in Illinois.
But he's successful. Yeah. I mean, like your dad to come to America, you were telling that story about fourth grade education, whatever it is, but just a shit ton of grit, it sounds like, and did everything you could to make sure you guys, and
yeah,
I mean,
100%.
From top to bottom, it sounds like you're all doing all right. So if you have guys who went to medical school or Stanford and you like, well, I mean,
his son's the one at Stanford.
Oh, I gotcha.
So he's,
but still
my nephew.
That's,
that kid's incredible.
So when you were like in middle school, like, well, you're in El Paso and you were really close to the border. I mean, like obviously being Alfonso, did you play soccer?
I didn't. I played football.
Oh, okay.
I wrestled.
Did you really?
And I played basketball. Yeah.
What weight did you wrestle?
189.
Were you any good?
Okay.
There's a couple schools from El Paso that like my kids trade paint with at some of these tournaments, and they're
the story that I tell
scrappy.
people that I made it to state. I wrestled against Sean Jordan. I don't know if you know Sean.
Mm-mm.
He was a running back in El Paso, but he then went to LSU the year they won the national championship.
Gotcha.
He's now was a USC fighter.
Oh, no kidding?
He won state 2 years in a row at 189.
Okay.
I mean, I got my ass kicked, but
I'm sure.
But he was just a tank. But that's a pretty cool story. Like, cause you see him on TV, and I'm like, hey, I wrestled that guy.
That's awesome.
It was fun. Yeah, I only wrestled my junior and senior year.
How did you get into wrestling your junior year?
I didn't do I only did basketball my freshman and sophomore year. And I was a football player, and the coach was like, "Hey, you need to do something other."
Oh, in the off season, you needed a second sport, and that was a conditioning sport.
And go to wrestling. You'll like it. It's a good conditioning. I loved it. Like I wish I would have done it longer.
No kidding.
Oh, wrestling was awesome.
That's awesome.
I loved it.
So you had a football coach that said you need to pick up a secondary sport, and this was an option. What did you gain from it?
Honestly, just
what did you love about it? I guess
just I didn't realize everybody said how much of a mental game it is, and I didn't realize how much of a mental game it is until you start slowing down. Like in the beginning, it's very fast, and you're trying to muscle your way into everything. And
yeah,
like you're just wearing yourself the fuck out.
Oh, for sure.
And once it starts to slow down for you, and once it starts to like,
it's called flow.
Once you start to just flow, yeah. Once you just start to go through it, it starts becoming a mental game. Like you start playing chess. Like you start putting. I remember like when I started to put myself into openings where, like I'm letting him grab my leg, or I'm letting him go for a certain move,
baiting him,
knowing that I'm going to do something else right afterwards. And then you start doing like 2 or 3 step. Like I'm going to do this. He's going to do that. As soon as I got to that point, it started getting really fun for me.
So I'll say a few things. I think a lot of people think that wrestling is just like the caveman sport. It's the ultimate.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
And in some cases, like the training, like when you train as a wrestler, it is 90% physical. Because someone's telling you what to do.
Intense.
Oh, it's not meant to teach you. I mean, you're going to learn technique as a byproduct, but the training's intense intentionally because they want to pressure test your capacity to endure more pain. Wrestling is about who can endure the most pain and who's going to do that to improve their position. That's it. It's about improving your position and enduring pain. And whoever can take the most typically wins. But when you wrestle and you compete, it is 90% mental. It's chess on your feet. And what I've learned is that some of the greatest wrestlers you see, they're savant smart, right? And there's more CEOs in the Global Fortune 500 that have been on a wrestling mat than have been on a court or a field. And it's because you're in a combat sport. You're in a street fight with rules, and you're learning how to calculate in real time, So
100%.
There's a lot of advantages in the kinetic environment that you evolved into. I mean, doesn't that kinetic environment remind you of a really complicated construction project?
100%. No, there's so many similarities there. And I wish, like, looking back now, like, you can actually prepare. Like, you can watch film on who you're going to wrestle against. You can
strategize against.
There's so many different things that now I wish I would have, looking back, it's the things I wish I would have known. I would have gotten into wrestling a lot earlier. But I got into better shape as a result of wrestling going into my senior year, for example.
What did you do in football? I mean, were you offense, defense?
I played tight end on offense, but my main position was outside linebacker on defense.
Oh, no. So I have to imagine that's a more enjoyable part where you're laying down the hits.
I loved it.
Were you good?
I was pretty good. Yeah, I was pretty good.
Speed-wise? I mean, is that the thing?
4.8.
I don't know what that's good.
40, decent. I mean, I wasn't like, I didn't get any offers to go to play college ball. If that's
but you just had, I mean, like, at least you had fun.
I had a ton of fun. I made the all-city team. I made the all-district team. And so, but you got to keep it in comparison. I grew up in El Paso. They're not necessarily a football town, if you will.
What is it from a sport perspective?
Probably soccer. I mean, they have really, really good football teams. They just have a lot of schools. And so the schools that do really well at the local level, when they come play schools in Dallas or schools in Houston, or in our case, like Midland Lee, that always beat us pretty bad. But it was good competition. I enjoyed it.
So what was it like? I mean, what did you learn about? You're in El Paso. You play football. You wrestle. Did you know that you wanted to go to college at that time?
Yeah, no. So
what was that community like for you? What was it that was building the fire inside of you? How did you ever think that you'd be where you're at now?
No. So I remember going back, trying to think, and we'll talk probably eventually about a podcast I want to start. And one of the first guys that I'm going to interview is a guy named Albert Montano. And I remember being in 6th grade with Albert, and we were in what was called, in elementary, I was in gifted and talented. I was pulled out, went to a separate school.
You're always a nerd, yeah.
So got bused to a separate school. I had no idea what that really meant. when I got into middle school, they didn't have gifted and talented, but they started this new STEM kind of class. First day, you got to test into it. There was 4 of us that were in this class. That's it. And Albert was one of them. And
this is your middle school?
6th grade year.
Okay.
And Mr. Cromwell was our teacher. And I don't think we ever really actually learned anything academic. He would just sit there for 45 minutes because that was the first year we would also start changing classes. And you have 45-minute blocks. And so every day for 45 minutes, he'd just give us a lecture about life and career and like college. And it was interesting. I remember one day he pulled me and Albert aside and kind of just had this like conversation with us. Like, if you 2 gentlemen apply yourselves, like there is like the sky's the limit. Like he kind of worded it in a way where like, I don't know what your plans are. I don't know if you have any, aspirations to do anything big, but if you guys are different. And if you guys apply yourselves, the sky's the limit. And he recommended us to join, at the time it was like a trivia club, but it was like Haiku. I don't know if you've heard of Haiku here in Texas. It's like a Jeopardy for middle schools.
Really?
Yeah. And so we joined the team and he was the coach. And we made it to state. We actually competed against the...
How many people on that team?
4.
Okay.
And me and Albert were 2 of them. Wesley and Sarah.
Were they the other 2 in your 4-person class?
No. Wesley was, Sarah wasn't. We made it to state, and we ended up... they wanted us to play against the high school team that won because we were that good. We beat them.
No way.
Middle school, yeah.
That's fantastic.
And so...
What's the competition? Like, what
It's literally just trivia questions. Like...
Oh, okay.
Just like, what does LCD stand for? Liquid crystal display. What does the coefficient of this? Just random, all school academic based.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a really, really good team, which was crazy because we were 6th and 7th graders.
So what did that do to set you up for high school?
So we ended up, when we went to state, the competition was in Waco. And I don't know if he was supposed to or not. He took us to the Baylor campus and literally spent the day.
Just to see what a school looks like at college?
And we were supposed to do all sorts of other activities for the competition, but the actual competition wasn't until the next day. There was like a ceremony and we ditched all of that. And he's like, no, like we're going to take advantage of it. I'm going to walk you guys to a college campus. So you guys will get way more out of that than anything else. And that was the first time I'd ever walked really on a college campus and like him talking us through like.
Were you 7th grade or 6th?
At that point I was in 7th grade now. Okay. And I think I remember coming back talking to Albert like, hey, this is what I want to do. Like I got to figure out how I do this.
You want to go to college.
And so I knew from 7th grade that like, okay, this is it. So like I remember telling, I don't know, for my friends at the time, like I'm going to graduate. When I graduate high school, I'm going to graduate valedictorian. So like that was my goal even as a 7th, 8th grader.
No kidding.
I ended up graduating 4th in my class, so I got close, but I didn't make it.
Did you know what you wanted to study at that?
No, I had no idea. That's
you just knew you wanted to go.
Whole other conversation, yeah.
I love those stories. I love how people discover that.
I Googled highest paying job out of college.
Shut up.
Swear to God.
And that's what you...
Yep, that's what I started.
How did you know to do that?
I knew I wanted to make more money than than we had at the time, and
yeah,
I didn't know what... I probably didn't even know what a good salary was. Like, you could have thrown a number at me, and I would have been like, yeah, that sounds great.
All right, well, listen, I want to get to that still, but let's back up real quick because I feel like there's more to still learn regarding how that spark...
Oh, 100%.
And is that guy still a teacher? Does he...
I've looked for Mr. Cromwell several times. I've not been able to find him. And I've even talked to Albert and some of the people there at the middle school. Because I feel like he really, like, it was that for me, it was that pivotal point. And, like, somebody pulling you aside and being like, hey, like, I believe in you, kind of like,
yeah,
you're different. That was like the first time somebody, other than of course your family, like your brothers and your parents, are always going to tell you how amazing you are.
But more objectively, a teacher.
A teacher, absolutely.
Yeah. I remember, like, listen, that affirmation is different than what you get from your unconditional love of the family, right? That it's a different level of validation almost. So knowing now that he triggered something inside of you, like, did you start applying yourself more, like he said?
Oh, 100%.
To like what? In what way?
I knew I wanted to graduate like valedictorian. So like everything from...
How many kids in that school? Like the campus, like your year, like if you're 4th in your class?
We started with about 1,000.
That's a lot.
Finished with 355.
No kidding?
That just goes, I mean, it's where it was, and it's a socially disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged area.
So is that why there's people that have to leave to go work for the family? Sort of
Yeah, I mean that and like finishing education in that area isn't a priority.
interesting.
But not for everybody though. I mean the group that I hung out with and the group that I was with, I mean they're, I mean, awesome. Like they.
But did you have expectations? Your parents? I mean,
Yeah, oh
your
yeah.
brother. You
Oh
know.
yeah, no.
Okay, so they're like, you're going to be educated.
Yeah, no. There was no. It wasn't a conversation of if. For me, it was a matter of like, how am I going to afford it? If that makes any sense. Military was an option. I mean, I remember I went all the way up to. This is a whole other conversation.
Oh no, we're having that conversation.
I took my ASVAB.
How what did you do?
I scored a 99.
Jesus.
And I was gonna go and become a Navy
a CB or something.
CCB. And the only reason
they didn't try to get you in the nuke program.
No, they did.
Oh, of course.
I couldn't do it because I would have been a naturalized citizen, and you needed to be a.
Because you were born in Mexico.
Yes, and so that's the only reason why I didn't join.
No way. They must have changed it because there was a guy from like. Yeah, I get it. Damn, that's crazy.
So I had to have been a born U.S. citizen, not a naturalized citizen at the time to enter the program. And so they were trying to get me into some other really, really good programs. I had gone pretty far, and this is a whole other conversation. I had one of my best friends in high school. He lived with us for my junior and senior year of high school, and his aunt was a financial aid counselor at a college in California. I'm not gonna know which one. And I remember telling her the story of like, hey, here's how much I got in scholarships. Here's how much I got in grants. I'm short this amount, like, and we didn't have the means to do that. And she's like, no, she's like, that's bullshit. Like, you should be able to get financial aid. And she's like, hey, let me do this. And she flew out from California to El Paso, picked me and the guy's name is Flavio, one of my best friends from when I was a kid. Took me and Flavio to Tech, where I went to school.
No kidding. She showed you Tech? Did you want to go there already?
I did. They offered me a really good scholarship, and so that was part of it. At the time, I was in a relationship, and so that was the closest, but yet going away university. So I knew I wanted to go out and like not stay in El Paso. And that was the closest one that I could still drive. It was 5.5 hours.
Is that all it is?
5. It's pretty. I mean, it was a decent
That's
drive.
Not bad. No, I thought it'd be longer.
So I knew I needed to get away. That was the closest one. They offered me the best scholarship. And then when his aunt flew in, took us up during the weekend, met with the financial aid office. Going into the office, in the meeting, I didn't have enough to pay for it. At the output of that, because she knew all the lingo, she knew like expected family EFC, expected family contribution, how it's supposed to be calculated. She was almost like taking the counselor to school because that's what she does.
So she was helping block and tackle.
So she was helping block and tackle. At the output of it, I had enough money to go to college.
No kidding.
And so between scholarships, grants, and like obviously I took out loans to pay for everything. It was enough. And I was like, okay, like wow, like it was she did that for me. That was huge.
So going back to that, you had a purpose. I mean, getting your education seems like at the time it mattered most.
It was a means to just getting out. Like it was a means of
getting out of El Paso.
Not getting out of El Paso, getting out of the situation where like you're living paycheck to paycheck, if you will. Getting out of a way to like build a career. Like how I didn't know what I would be doing. I Googled literally highest paying job, and at the time it was intellectual property lawyer.
Is that what you were going to go study?
So I talked to a counselor at my school, and they said, hey, in order if you want to be an IP lawyer, you have to do engineering or math. Because undergrad.
And you're undergrad.
And it's a different bar after you finish law. And I'm like, okay, well, then I'm going to go to whichever site. When I applied engineering undecided. I was like, I knew I liked math and science. So I'll do engineering. I'll do engineering undecided, and whichever program gives me the best scholarship, that's what I'll pick. And so Tech offered a pretty decent scholarship with electrical engineering. I'm like, all right, I guess I'm a double E.
Is that really how you did it?
That's how I got into it.
That's how you did it? How did you, okay, so listen, you applied to Tech, but is there any other schools that you applied to?
I did, A&M, UT. Got into, I graduated 4th. And so in the state of Texas,
you're guaranteed.
You're guaranteed in. And so I got into Tech, I got into UT, I got into A&M. Looking back, I wish I would have applied to like the Stanfords and the Harvards and the
or the Dukes.
Or the Dukes.
Like Dave.
Yeah, never or Tom. Like I didn't apply, and I think a little bit was I didn't know how the financial aids of those institutions work. Like if you can get in and you have the
knowledge, if you have the horsepower to get in,
and you have them, and you truly have the need.
Yeah,
their endowment funds are just so incredible that you might have to work while you're there. You might have to be a TA. You might have to tutor.
But like looking back, I knew.
But you can pay. I didn't know that path existed.
Yeah.
So like talking to my looking at my nephew, for example, now, and it's I mean, he's earned every ounce of it, but he's at Stanford. He's getting paid to go to school on a full ride, getting extra money to be a TA.
Good for him.
He's making money to go to one of the best. It's amazing.
Yeah, it'd be stupid not to go, I guess. But like, do you really feel like because you didn't go to Stanford,
Oh no,
it hasn't held you back in any way?
I
Right?
loved my time at Tech. I made some of my best friends today are all people that I met there.
A lot of tech people in the industry too, right?
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. I mean, I was close to home, so I was able to get home and see my family on a regular basis.
Who do you guys hate more now, being a Red Raider, or is it the Aggies or the Longhorns?
You know, I don't know if I have hatred for either because I work for so many people.
Oh, I guess you're just being PC.
I think if we're playing football,
we could edit it out if you want.
No, I'd rather beat UT than A&M. I've also had some, like, every game I've been to at A&M, they're like, Tech fans are freaking horrible. I don't know if you've heard that before. No. We're not very hospitable to our competitors. Every game I've been to at A&M, like, they're the nicest freaking fans. Like, I remember one year I went and we got our asses kicked, and I'm wearing Tech shirt. We went to a bar.
They were cool.
They buy me drinks. Like, that doesn't happen in Lubbock, man. Like, literally, like, their fans were like, "Hey, great game. Sorry you got your ass kicked. Let me buy you a beer."
Sure.
I'm like, yeah. It's hard to root. And then I work with so many Aggies now in the industry. I mean, shit,
yeah, they're everywhere. Everywhere in this state.
They're good people. I can't argue with, like.
What's your favorite Aggie story? I'll say this because, like, my first insight to what Aggies are all about was through Brant Jones. He educated me.
I love Brant. Yeah.
Oh, he's one of the best. But like, there is a A&M mafia. I mean, like, it's different. I mean, I'm not saying Tech guys don't have their.
Joel's an Aggie.
Those Aggie people. The only thing I can see that I could relate it back to is almost like to an academy level, like that ring knocker network and stuff. Like, and I respect that. I think it's amazing. And like, I remember when we first moved here, I live in Austin, Texas, and my kids were talking to me like, "Hey, if I get a chance to go to A&M or UT, which one do I want to go to?" And I go, the only UT alumni CEO in our space that I know is Crosby, right? I mean, I got Mackenzie on my team. She's a UT alum, right?
That's right.
She's lights out. But I don't see as many UT in this space as I do A&M. And I was like, well, what's the joke they always say? Like the A&M, the Aggies are like, what do you call someone in Texas that went to A&M?
I haven't heard this before.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I heard it was through Brant. Like, what do you call someone in the state of Texas that went to Texas A&M?
What?
Boss.
That's fair enough.
Because they're going to be your boss,
yeah,
right? And I was like, so my kids are like, which one do I go to? I go, well, if you get the chance, you're going to go that one. But it makes sense. You know,
100%. A perfect example is my neighbor, Steven. We're really close. He actually is my next door neighbor too, Stephen Barber.
Okay. Yeah.
With Google. His daughter graduates this year. And I remember from high school and having conversations about where she should apply and like just kind of talking through. And I'm like, honestly, if she wants to get into construction or project management,
yeah, for sure.
Like, dude, it's hard to beat A&M. So like that's where she's hoping to go.
They have a cool program there, and
knock on wood, hopefully that's where she gets in. That'd be extremely. I mean, I'd love for her to go to Tech, but you can't beat the A&M's program.
There's a lot of smart people in this industry I've met that went to Tech as well.
100%.
I mean, look, you can't go wrong with those schools. But so you looked at other schools and you were looking at it based on the construct of what you could afford.
Yeah.
So it was like, I'm going to stay in the state of Texas because
it was the perfect package of like, they gave me the best offer. They were the most economically, they weren't as expensive, maybe is the right word.
Sure.
They gave me the best package scholarship wise, closest to home. So 5.5 hours away versus UT would have been like 8.5. Austin was probably, or A&M was probably about 9. And so that's a little hard to get back to.
Oh, no.
For a weekend. Like that's.
I think it's not even.
Holidays.
I think it's longer than what you.
It's probably longer because it's
it
like,
is. Yeah.
And so those would have been tough if for that. And so it was just the right combination of.
So you've picked this. Let me tell you, I'm going to dovetail this back into why I'm laying it back out because my mind thinks in like patterns. You know, I'm looking to be and I'm trying to see the pattern, right? So for you knew that you wanted out of El Paso, and you mentioned something earlier that if I could, I'd like to take you back to it. You're like, I've only been to El Paso a few times. Like Anthony on my team's former Army, he was stationed in El Paso. He picked El Paso, and he liked El Paso, right? So, but like, I don't know much about it, but I do know that it is right there on the border, and there's a lot of violence and friction there.
I loved actually El Paso gets a. I think for me it was I wanted to get out, not of El Paso, but I wanted to get out so I can focus on my education and focus on like not
Making a
having
living.
not having the distractions of like getting the temptations to go out and getting the temptations to like go hang out with the buddies that I went to high school with. I wanted to be able to just go into an area where everything around me was kind of in that same place and like trying to get through college, for example, and going through that. And I wanted the college experience a little bit of just like going out and like being on my own and not.
What did you do? Did you like join a fraternity?
I did. I joined a fraternity.
Which one?
I joined Sigma Lambda Beta, which is predominantly Hispanic. It's a multicultural, so it's kind of interesting depending on where in the U.S. It's predominantly Hispanic, but if you go down to Florida, for example, it's mostly Cubans and predominantly that area. If you go to New York, it's a big Asian
really
denomination. But across the U.S., we're mostly a Hispanic fraternity.
I got you.
Two of my high school buddies that were there a year before I was were in the frat, and so that's how I got exposure to them.
Would you let a cracker like me in?
Absolutely,
absolutely.
All right. We have a few.
Look, man, I can make the best tacos. I'm not.
That's awesome.
I don't want to brag.
Absolutely, man. But yeah, no, it did the fraternity thing, and so I actually, when I graduated, I wanted to go back and live in El Paso. El Paso gets a really bad rap, and it's a wonderful city. It's one of the safest big towns in the U.S. And so if you look at the population versus like violent crimes, super, super safe. Across the border, yes, it was, especially at the time when I was in college, it was
kinetic,
dangerous, maybe a good word. But El Paso, extremely, extremely safe town. Great people. I think the traditions and like a very big family town. I looked for a job actually when I was in San Antonio. I got out of law school. I was
but you graduated with a double E.
I graduated with a double E.
Okay.
I did go to law school, but
did you really?
I did. I didn't finish. That's a whole other story.
Okay, all right.
I didn't finish. But after I got out and I was working, before I went to Kansas City to
you did tell
Mitchell, me. I was looking for a job to get back. Like I didn't want to leave. I want to make sure like leaving El Paso wasn't the goal. It was just being in a place where I can focus on the things that I wanted to do.
That's where the opportunities were. They just weren't in El Paso.
And they could have been, but I would have, because UTEP is there. UTEP's a really good school. But
school.
I would have probably lived at home, which nothing bad, but I wanted that experience of like living on my own and like, and then at the time I had a girlfriend that I spent a lot of time with when I was in high school. And so like, it gave me the ability. I don't think I would have studied as much. It was like that perfect combination of my freshman year in college. I had a girlfriend back home, so I wasn't necessarily tempted to go out and party. And so I literally focused on school. And like, I mean, I finished my freshman year with a 4.0. Like, it's rare. But because I wasn't like, I was going out with my buddies and I was.
You wouldn't have let me in your fraternity. I'm just telling you right now.
No. We actually at one point had the highest, which is kind of cool that we were the Hispanic fraternity. We had the highest highest GPA in.
Man, I'm not even surprised a little bit.
In the fraternity council, like.
Well, you guys are so driven. Your purpose was like. I mean, you said it best. I mean, like
we still partied on the weekends, though. I mean, we still had fun.
Well, if you're in a fraternity, you have no choice. Yeah. It's the law, right? But like, I do enjoy how people. Life is wrestling. You know, you're a wrestler, and it's all about what you can endure and how well you can improve your position. It's all fighting is. It's all wrestling is. It's all mixed martial arts and combat. It's positioning and what you can endure, not what you can give out sometimes. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
So when you get into this lifestyle where, you know, you graduate, you're like, I'm so dead. I'm going after you were not coin operator, but you're like, I'm going to where the money's at. And then you realize like, I still have to be happy with what I'm doing. So for whatever reason, we don't have to get into it, but the law thing, you shifted back. You wanted to fall back into your engineering background because you ended up in construction.
So interesting there.
Yeah. So how'd that transition take place?
It's probably started with while I was at Tech, my senior year at the job fair. I interned every summer at General Motors, and so that was fun, great experience. I knew
GM back in El Paso.
No, so GM in Detroit.
You would go to Detroit?
Yeah, I went to Detroit 2 summers, and then.
How are the tacos in Detroit?
Not the best, but
they're not El Paso.
They're really good, like Indian. Like I found some really good Indian food. I loved my time in Michigan. It was fun.
Did you?
Yeah, it was. I was.
I like Michigan.
I was there in the summer, And so
Detroit's a tough town though sometimes.
it was, but you could go over across the border and drink. That was the other cool part. And first summer was 19,
Which
second
was
summer I
what
20.
every intern at GM
Yeah,
should be doing.
That's exactly what we did. And so we had a really good time. Last summer I was here in Dallas at the plant in Arlington.
Oh, okay.
And so we were building like the Escalades and the Cadillacs, and
Was it
that
cool?
was super cool experience. So I knew every one of those internships, like I knew that wasn't going to be my career. So I had fun. I learned a lot. This whole aspect of like, have you ever interviewed for a job where you're like, not, if you get it, great. If you don't, it's okay. And that's usually the ones that you just destroy. That's how I went into the job fair. So I went into the job fair my senior year.
Yeah, I've done it though.
Just wanting to get experience interviewing. Like I knew I was going to go to law school. I was already accepted in St. Mary's. I had a scholarship to go there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go live in San Antonio. I'm going to go to law school. But I wanted to get more in interview experience. I hadn't had a lot of them. And so I did the whole job fair circuit, interviewed a crap ton. The one that I liked the most and actually went through the whole process was constructors. Now they're called
No
Structure
way.
Tone.
That's how early you were on before they were even Structure Tone?
It was constructors. But they flew me
Jack
into...
Jones hired you?
Jack. So they flew me into Dallas. And
Hold on a second. You're at school at Tech.
I'm a senior at Tech.
And they had a job fair and constructors went there.
Constructors went there. It was their 2 recruiters.
Interesting.
I did well enough that they sent 4 of us to Dallas. Interviewed with Jack, I think Brandon, because he was already there because he went to Tech.
Okay.
And then the 4 of us.
Because he hadn't started CPS yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Him, Kerner, and Jack
they were all there.
And so at the time, Dan Bush was the president, and they had like this whole dinner afterwards at his house. And he lived in.
What was Joe Cribbs at the time? Was he like his
He was
number
right
2?
on number 2, right under Dan. And his house was just in Highland Park, just incredible house. And like he had it all catered. And I'm like, man, this is.
I want to be in construction.
Like, how do I get into this life?
Yeah.
And so
those
I
were the
away.
days, though. The GC life isn't quite like it used to be back in those days.
I mean, they still do quite well for themselves.
Oh, for sure. But
I remember coming back to college being like, man, if I ever didn't go to law school, that's what I want to do.
For real.
I got the offer, and I turned it down because I ended up going to law school. Well, I remember being 5 months into law school. I hadn't even finished my first semester, and I'm just hating life. It's completely different.
What are you hating though? Being broke or
no?
school?
I think it's a couple of things. Like one, like I look back at like the path of engineering school. Both of my roommates were double E's as well. We had every class together. The group that we had studied together, I don't know, 6-7 hours a day.
Was it even hard?
It was. It was just a lot of hours. Like literally, you would study to the point where like everything's comical. Like it just doesn't matter.
Huh.
On every Saturday, like we studied throughout the day.
Really?
Like I was the one that was leaving because I had like a fraternity event in the afternoon, but every Saturday, every Sunday, like we would just live at the library. During the week, you would go to school, and then from 5 to 9, we were studying somewhere. So I mean, literally, you lived. It was a full-time job.
Sure.
But it was you're with the same people all the time. It was a big camaraderie. Like if I didn't know how to do something, somebody else did, and like there was no qualms about teaching and helping, and it was back and forth, and you just we all got through it together, and so that made it fun. Law school was very different. Like it was, first of all,
more confrontational, right? Because
competing. You're competing against the curve, and so it doesn't matter how well everybody does. There's only going to be a set number of A's, set number of B's. Some people that are on scholarship, like that's the difference of staying on scholarship or not. And so you had things like people would hide books in the library. So you couldn't check out certain books that were like key for an exam.
For real?
And they would literally hide them. So you couldn't
have the advantage.
You couldn't have the advantage. They would.
That's fucked up.
There would be a study group of like 6 people. They would get the books that they need at their table, and then they would do shifts so that they never left the library and the books never left their table. And so
did you ever do that?
Oh no. Like
it's pretty messed up.
I got through it. I had a core group of 2 people. And then also like in engineering school, everybody starts off with like the intro to this, intro to that. So you kind of like work your way into meeting it's not hard material. You're building the relationships, you jump right into it. And like in law school, when you start right away, it's the areas also that I wasn't the most, like I'm strong in math. I'm strong in science. This is a lot of reading and writing, and like I'm also very black and white when it comes to like my analytical approach. And so like a very black and white. Here's the formula. Here's the answer.
Subjective theory is hard.
Here, like if you can have a completely different viewpoint, and you just have a better way at articulating it and like working your way through your logic of why you think that wall is white and I'm telling you it's blue, but you work through why the color spectrum and this and this and this, and you'll end up getting a better grade than when I'm 100% in the right. So it's just a different mindset. I combine all of that, and I was like, man, this is not for me.
That's why they call it practicing law.
100%.
Some practice better. I mean, it's so subjective in the way that they interpret things and the way that they present it and weaponize it, right? Whereas,
dude, 100%.
Coming from an engineering background, it's based on science. It's black and white.
And
right? So I could understand how uncomfortable that could be.
It was different. And what the icing on the cake for me is one of my best friends now, Marcos. He's a project manager now from the Google account. He was getting married, and we had a bachelor party in Vegas, and there were 6 of us, and we went to a poker table. And it was probably like 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and there's one guy playing, and so we all sat down. So there's now 6 of us
counting cards.
We're all playing, and he's on the end. He's the only one outside of the group. So we start chit-chatting, and he's obviously interested because one of us getting married. We're being loud. And we ask him, like, what do you do for a living? He's like, oh, I'm an intellectual property lawyer. And I'm like, no shit. That was the first time I'd ever met one in life. Like, I went into it just because I paid. I forgot what it said it paid out of college. And so I literally peppered him all, like, probably played next to him for like an hour. And what I got out of it is he was miserable in his job.
Yeah.
He hated his job. He loved the pay. Wasn't happy, wanted to figure out what he was going to do after, like as a different job that still paid the same amount. And that for me was like, okay, I'm not doing this. I need to figure out a way to get out. And was going to leave law school, and that for me was like a big it's the first time I'm like failing.
If you have a person that's there that's telling you to get out,
and he hates life, like he's telling like he's like, dude, you went double E, go get your PE, go do this, go practice, like do something different. Like you're going to hate life. And so I did. And so first call I made was Jack.
Nice.
And which was interesting because at the time I didn't realize the dynamic of what was happening. I called Jack, and I had an apartment in San Antonio. I had a buddy that had moved in with me from El Paso as my roommate. And I was really liking the town, so I wanted to stay in San Antonio. So I remember I called Jack. I said, hey, is your offer still good? I'd love to accept it. I ended up going to law school, which is why I didn't take it, but I'd love to join. And he's like, absolutely. We'd absolutely honor the offer. And I was like, but I want to join your San Antonio office. And Jack just said, hey, just give me some time. Let me confirm that we can do that. And he came back to me like a day or 2 later and said, yeah, we'll honor the offer.
Who's the guy down there who runs the San Antonio?
Mark Jones.
Yeah, nice guy.
But I
didn't know him that well.
I didn't know at the time the dynamic. You got to think about it from this perspective. That office was probably 12 or 13 people, very close-knit, tight. They're all run their own profit centers, and so he's responsible for his own, profit and loss.
And you're being shoved down his throat.
And somebody from Dallas is making a higher decision on a kid out of college that nobody, not him nor his team.
Sure, Mark appreciated that.
Now I look at it back and like the way and I noticed like the tension. Nobody said anything, but like all the little things. Like my first day, I walk in and he asked me some question about, do I have any PPE or something like that? And I said, no. I was like, no, sir. I've never been on a job site before. And so he goes up and he gets his personal hard hat. Takes his name off of it. And it's like an old school, like kind of like the steel erectors wear that. Yeah. It's like that special color. Takes his name off of it and he goes, here, have mine.
It's classy.
And so I was like, that for me, I still have it. So that was a big step. And I remember I get sent to my first job, and it's the Lowe's data center there in San Antonio. Yeah, and it's right off of Rogers Run. We built Rogers Run. Like that street didn't exist. And that's where the Microsoft and all the other data centers are now. That was my first job out of college.
Your first construction project was data centers?
Yeah. That was, at the time they were hiring mechanical engineering majors. It was kind of back then it was a newer thing. I won't say a new thing because people were doing it, but it was a new thing that they were like, hey, we'll teach them construction.
Smart.
They comprehend the mechanical aspect or the mechanical and electrical.
The mechanical permutation was the one that was evolving the most.
Yeah. And so my first job was a data center, and I don't know what it was at the time. The PM was a guy named Anthony Roberts. And I show up on the job site and he's like, all right, let's go for a walk. And I don't know what it was. It was probably
What did he hire you as? A project engineer?
Project engineer, yeah. Like just a field engineer. Like I was entry level. And he took me on, and I don't know if it was the questions I was asking or the look on my face or something, where he kind of stops and we're like we're like in between the trailer and the site. And he goes, have you ever been on a job site before? I was like, no. He goes, okay, we're going back to the trailer. So the next week I signed in OSHA 30 for
gotcha.
Because I don't know if what I was asking or like the look on my face.
Red flags is like, let's start at the beginning.
And so, yeah, I did that for 2 years, and like it ended up working out really well. I ended up meeting my first mentor, which like
Who's that?
his name's Armando Aguilar. At the time, he was a senior PE, about to be promoted to PM, APM.
At Constructors?
At Constructors.
They hadn't been acquired yet?
Hadn't been, they were a structure tone organization,
Okay.
but they were still flying the flag as Constructors.
Gotcha, okay.
But they had already been bought, but structure tone pretty much let them do their thing.
Because the credibility and then...
Yeah, and they were big in Texas, and so they were operating still as Constructors. And so Armando was my first like real mentor, and like for me it was huge because he was a Hispanic guy in the industry, one of the only ones that I had seen in construction. A few years older than me, probably. I was about 22 at the time, so he must have been probably 29, 28. Worked his ass off, and like the dude was just solid, man. Like he would take me on walks. He would...
Where's he from?
Chicago. And so he had moved down with his family. Had only been there a year or so longer than I have in San Antonio. We still talk to this day. I mean, he's running a pretty big general contractor in San Antonio with his family. Yeah.
He's still at Structure Tone?
No.
Okay,
He joined a different GC, and he's running the San Antonio office for him now.
Good for them.
He's fantastic. Like, but he did little things. Like he would give me. I remember the first estimating assignment he gave me. We were doing a project for USAA, like the insurance, and they had a super huge campus there.
Oh, sure.
And so he gave me an assignment on Thursday. Said, "Hey, I need this done by the end of the weekend. Can you get it done?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Hey, I'm probably gonna come in because I don't have a computer at home. It's easier to use my screens." And like it was little things. He's like, "Oh, if that's the case, dude, use my office." And there was only, I'm telling you, the San Antonio office was small. There was 2 offices on the ends. And one was Mark Jones, and the other one was whoever the most senior person that wasn't at a job site at the time. If they didn't have a home, that's who sat there. So at the time, it was Armando, because all the other senior PMs were out on different jobs. So that office was assigned to Armando during that time. He's like, "Hey, dude, just use my office. Use double screens." And so, like, for me, that was a big deal. Like, having somebody that I work for, like, be like, "Hey, use my office." So I remember going in, spending all weekend. Like, I'm in a corner office of, like, a really nice building in San Antonio that it's overlooking, like, that downtown. I'm like, this is different. Like,
you made it.
Nowhere in life. Like, and at the time, I was like, who knows what I was making? But
who cares? You feel like you're a grown up now.
I felt like I was a grown up, and like I worked my ass off. And I remember him coming in on Monday, and I'm like, "Hey, I finished the assignment. I want you to look at it." He's like, "What?" And like that was like my first taste of like, dude, as long as you work your ass off and as long as you grind, like you will stand out.
I think that this industry rewards that more than like which school you went to.
100%. Right? Like as long as you're willing to grind and work your butt off, like everything else will fall into place.
Because everything that you learned about this industry, you didn't learn in college. I mean,
no. I 100%. Like I learned everything on the job. Like certain concepts, maybe like flow of electrons,
sure.
And like, but no, like 99.9% of what you learned, I learned on the job. And like probably this constant theme of like having the right mentors as you grow up. So like Armando was the first one, and then it was Jack, and then it was a guy named Paul and Leon.
Who's that?
So I went to
hold on, yeah. From Structure Tone, you were an APM. You were a project engineer for the first years.
For the first years. No, so even when I left, I was still a project engineer. So I got 2 years in or a year and a half in. There's a company email that says, "Hey, we have a job for Bank of America in Kansas City, and we're looking for people to move there temporarily." They had me at free housing. I was like, wait a minute. So I remember, I remember pinging Jack like, "Hey, I'm single. I'm renting an apartment. I can break my lease and go live for free."
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, we pay for housing for all the employees." And what the deal was, Bank of America had awarded Structure Tone a job in Dallas, but when they finally did their due diligence, they realized they couldn't get power on time to support the build, and the only other place they had land available was Kansas City, and so they offered Structure Tone like, "Hey, we've already awarded you the job. We'll honor that award if you are willing to put a team together and build it in Kansas City instead."
Sure.
Structure Tone was not going to say no. So I said, absolutely. And so they ended up sending this company-wide email that was like, "Hey, who wants to move to Kansas City? It's a 2-year project. Here's kind of the details of what you get.
You don't pay for a living."
And I'm like, dude, I'm dumb. I'm in.
Yeah, why wouldn't
you? So I moved to Kansas City, and the 2 senior guys, they couldn't find anybody to move. And so they hired a guy named Leon Foster and Paul Mangin. Leon was a senior PM. Paul was the senior mechanical electrical PM. They both came from Mortensen. They had just finished the arena there in Kansas City. Huge arena, sprint center. And so they just finished the job. Leon was doing his master's at KU, probably in his late 20s, early 30s. Paul had just bought a house and was living in Kansas City. He was in a pretty serious relationship there. So both wanted to stay basically and not move back with Mortensen. And so they hired on with Structure Tone. And so they were Structure Tone employees, but they were completely brand new to like, they were just hired for the job. And so myself and about 5 or 6 others, Chad Stanley.
No way. Chad was with you on that program?
Chad was a superintendent in the field and I was in the office.
But he lived on that program with you for
Yeah. I mean, we lived in the same apartment complex. Like this was 15, 16 years ago.
Sure.
And so they're Paul and Leon, like from a mentor's perspective. And Jack
so
was
you go that far back with Chad. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were, I mean, looking back, I probably never would have thought we would cross paths again. Like after but yeah, he was a superintendent. And I mean, I learned a lot from him. I mean, I would go on walks with him.
Some shit.
He was already, I mean, by that point, he was already really experienced and like running the job basically in the field. I was overseeing the electrical trade, and so Paul was our MVP manager, and it was funny because he was just a few years older than I, but he had like so much experience by that point that he just took me under his wing and like.
So I remember that program. Who ran that program for them? Was that Rubinetti?
No, that was Joel Baldwin.
Oh yeah. Oh no kidding.
Joel was you got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Joel was so Joel had just on that job. Joel had just transitioned out. That was his first job, and he was the on-site PM for the owner. And so he was a Bank of America employee. I think there was trying to think. Rob was working, but he was working on the active side. Craig Fritz was there. But Joel was the overall seeing the greenfield construction, which was us.
Gotcha.
So he was my owner's rep. And so I met him there.
No shit.
Yeah, no, so that was a 2-year job. I was away from home. It was kind of cool. I would get to fly once a month, different places. And so I would go home, see my family every once in a while, come to Dallas, go to different places. But that's where I met Leon and Paul, who were probably like my next 2 mentors in life, if you will.
So did you transition at that point? When did you leave Structure Tone?
I left right after that job. So I still remember the day. I used to go on walks with Joel pretty often. And usually if Joel wanted to walk, he wanted to show you something that was wrong. And like, it was his way of like having you put your eyes on it to like, all right, I've taken care of. And so he comes into the office and it was a Saturday. On the weekends that I was there, like I worked, like all you did was just work.
Yeah.
And so I was in on a Saturday and he came in and he saw my truck and he's like, hey, do you want to go for a walk? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. And in my head, I'm like, okay, like he's going to point something out. I got to come back and fix it, which I kind of like too, because it gave me the opportunity to like
learn
and do something that he asked and do it quickly. Like I felt like every opportunity you have to do that. It's good when you're trying to build your brand.
Yeah.
And he wanted to go walk. We were building the Greenfield data center here, and there's an existing data center right next to it. He wanted to go on the live campus and go on the roof. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, okay, you probably get a good vantage point to something that's not right. I'm like, all right. I was like, hold on, let me go get the camera. So I'm like, I'm trying to get ready because I'm expecting for him to point something out.
Yeah.
And so we go up there, and the whole time he's talking about he's excited about closing out the job and how he's going to be moving to Dallas. And by the end of the walk, he basically was like, hey, I really think you should consider putting your name in the hat. I'm hiring PMs. He was getting promoted to be like a regional guy. They were going to be having a pretty large project there in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And but
Wyndham.
No.
Coit Road. I remember that program.
And so he thought that I would be a good person for it. And at that time, I wasn't even a senior PE yet. Like my Structure Tone did this rotating project engineer thing. And so you spent a year in the field, a year in estimating, a year in the office. Because I went to Kansas City, I kind of skipped
the
that.
office. Yeah.
And it just went straight to the project for 2 years and did a year in San Antonio. And so I was going to go spend 6 months in the estimating just to check the box. And I was going to graduate and then get promoted to senior PE if I would have stayed. And at the time, Joel was like, hey, I think you should interview for a project manager position. I think you would do it. There's a really large project. And I'm like, Joel, I don't think I'm qualified for that. He's like, no, I think you should interview for it. I was like, sure. So I remember going, I got on a plane, flew to Charlotte, did the interview. And I remember getting the offer, and like the pay was like 20 grand more than what I was making.
Which is huge. Yeah.
Huge at that time. I mean, I was 24 years old.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, holy shit, this is it. So yeah,
you're on the owner side now.
Accepted the job, man, and I moved to I moved to Plano. And
that's where I met you.
Yeah, and I oversaw the the Coit job for almost 3 years.
So think about that program. Like how many?
Oh, that was life changing for me. Like
That was a big program for all of us.
I worked my tail off. Like I worked like a dog. I worked 6 days a week, 14-hour days. Like I think I ate dinner at the job more than I did at home.
Oof.
I probably worked every Saturday I could if I didn't have something personal going on. But I enjoyed and you look at the people that you cross paths with now. Brian Verla at Cummins, that was his first real job with Cummins.
Okay.
Kevin, who's now at Google, that was his first real job with Brandt. You have Trevor, you had Doyle, you had, just the people.
Maldari, Fiedler.
Maldari was there. Fiedler was just a project engineer under Freddie at the time coming to the job site, man.
The first time Fiedler and I ever talked, I was in the construction trailer. Turner was the GC, I think, before Balfour came in. And I didn't realize it, but it was his big fat brain behind a lot of that shit, right? And he and I are arguing, and he goes, "Who is this?" And I was like, "This is Kirk. Who's this?" He's like, "This is David. Are you in the construction trailer?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And Page's office is in Austin.
Yeah.
He goes, "Stay there. I'll be there in a few hours."
He drove.
I don't know if he drove to the airport and flew right up, or if he drove up, but he came in with a vengeance. That was my first time meeting him that night, and turns out we were both kind of right. I think that he was sold something that it wasn't what was reflected on the scope of work that I was there as a PM to execute on. So that's where the friction was. But I mean, we had a great night that night. You know, we ended up discovering the truth of the facts, fixing it, and then just trucking on. But there was a lot of people I met on that program.
It was an amazing program.
Nathan Daly from my team was Siska Hennessy at the time.
That's where I met Nathan on your team.
Yeah.
Steven, we hired Steven as an APM.
Really?
And he's now running all of Texas work for Google. Like, you think back and just some amazing people.
A lot of talent on the program.
And everybody was just hungry. Like, everybody was just, there was a hierarchy of owner, GC, sub, but we didn't operate that way. Like, it was.
No.
We
it was
were
like
all
Randy Evans.
100%. Randy, he was the client. He was my client, internal client.
But he was a mentor to a lot of us.
A huge mentor.
And a very unassuming, smart person.
Unassuming, just incredible mentor. Like
good dude.
I remember once I sent an email and for the bank, I was project manager. I eventually moved over to the operations side for a couple of years. And I remember I just stepped into the operations role, and one of our chief engineers at a data center sends this email out, kind of lengthy. And there was a few technical errors that were wrong. And so I immediately reply, "Oh, hey, did you meant to say this instead of that, this instead of that?" And right away, the chief's like, "Yes, thank you for catching it. Appreciate it." My phone rings, and it's Randy. And this is like on a Friday afternoon. And I'm like, "Hey, Randy, yes, sir." I was like, "Well, how can I help you?" He's like, "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" I was like, "Absolutely." He's like, "Next time, pick up the phone and call the chief and have the chief correct his mistakes himself." And he kind of made this comment like, "We all know you're smart, and that's why you got the job. You have nothing to prove."
Oh yeah, he misinterpreted it.
That was a really good opportunity for you to like build credibility with your chief.
Yeah.
Who now, and from his perspective, he's like, "Look, the chief
called him out.
The chief is a 30-year vet. He's a guy that's been doing this longer than I've been alive."
Sure.
And he's getting corrected by like some late 20-year-old punk that is smart. But he's getting corrected in a reply all to everybody.
Sure.
Like, this was a perfect, next time it happens, just pick up the phone and call him. And I guarantee you that's going to be worth more for you in that relationship than you looking right on an email. And like that, it's those little things like that, those little pieces of advice that I'm like, you're absolutely right, Randy. So like, yeah, ever since that moment, like if I catch ever something like that, I don't ever I immediately pick up the phone. "Hey, you might want to check your email. Is this right?" And it's always like, "Oh man, thanks for calling me. I'll fix it right now."
But the grace that we get from those industry mentors and leaders.
Oh my goodness.
Think about all the ones that you have that didn't even know that they made an impact on your life, including the middle school teacher that you can't reach out or you can't connect with now. But like, it's amazing. A lot of people don't realize the impact they have on others.
I had that conversation with Leon. I told you about Leon in Kansas City. I was in New Orleans for an event for Procore just recently. Mm-hmm. And that's where he lives now. And so he's overseeing a general contractor there. And so we went and had lunch. And I told him afterwards, like, "You don't realize the impact you had on me." And I gave him an example. We used to write notice letters to Joel every time a change or something that cost us more money. And so he would have me draft every single one of them. And I would give it to him. And it literally looked like a English paper, like
when it was done?
pen. He was just
Oh, for
He
sure.
was so anal.
But he was trying to get you.
But I kept every single one. I still have them to this day in a notebook. And so like when I would go write the next one, I would pull the old one out with all the edits. And so that was my starting point. And then it doesn't matter where I started, he always found things to find. But over time, my goal was to get to the point where I wrote him a letter where I had zero. Like zero.
Yeah, that's what
I don't know if I ever got there, but I remember telling him the story. I was like, dude, like that for like how anal you were, that like that little thing is of like, you're actually reading the things that I write. Like you're actually paying attention. You're like, it's instilled a lot of like, even how I am a manager today. Like I still have those letters. And I remember telling him like, I have all your letters in a notebook. Like, every time I get into a conversation with like an employee where we're talking about, and I'm like, hey, let me tell you a story. I pull them out. And like, it's just like them seeing it helps prove it helps like.
You have a pretty soft, humble approach
Yes.
though. And listen, that type of stuff that you're talking about right now, like most people would have taken that type of redlining to your note there's some soft people out there that would not have responded well to that level of criticism, but instead you thrived in that, right? And that is what allowed you to get better, right? But some people don't look at it like that. Like you're lucky that he cared enough about you to make sure
100%.
that he helped you. He invested his time into reading those so that you can learn, right?
But what's interesting, and you brought up an interesting comment there that I've literally just had with a buddy of mine, is like remembering those little details, like taking criticism when you're early in your career and taking criticism like now, for example, if I do something maybe wrong and LD picks up the phone and is like, hey, Alfonso, I probably would have done this instead of that. Like it's the little things that got me here that you have to like, it doesn't matter what position you're in.
When you arrive, you're still a student.
You're still a student, and like keeping that mindset. I remember I had the conversation with one of my best friends, and he was complaining about some feedback that he got, and I just kind of gave him like I go, hey dude, can I give you some unsolicited feedback? And he's like, yeah. I was like, I can see the feedback that you got is true. He's like, really? And I was like, yeah. Like
Yeah.
it was probably hard for the person that gave you the feedback to even give you the feedback because you're in a pretty senior role now. So much easier to give it to like a new employee, like because it's keeping that mindset of like
It's
you can
easier
always
to
learn.
just dismiss. If you don't
100%.
care enough, you're like, that's fine.
100%.
But if you like the person, you're like, let me help you.
Yes.
You have to find those mentors with the grace that want to help.
I remember once I found like when I got at Google, Brian Nagel is a perfect example.
Did he go to the Air Force Academy, but he played
went
ball
to-
for a year at the Naval Academy or
Yeah.
something?
So he went to, I'll probably get it wrong. He went to Air Force Academy, played ball at the Naval Academy in.
He was one of their transfer students, I think.
Yeah, but it was the lightweight group, like the under a certain
150 pounds or something.
different weight. He was their quarterback, but then joined the Air Force and they got paid to go get his master's at MIT while in the Air Force. And so like me, like I didn't really even realize any of those programs even existed. Like, and so just going into, you asked the question of like, what is the thing that I want to do in this whole podcast? Like I want to start a podcast to interview people like that, for example, Hispanic people, just, it doesn't matter the background, just people to tell their story that are into a certain industry. So that the kids that are in high school and middle school today that maybe not know that there's all these different paths that like you can choose, and here's people that tell their story that kind of got to their path. It's everything from like I'd love to interview like people like Steven, for example. He came up to do the trades.
Really?
And he's a third generation electrician. I mean, his
No
grandpa was a union electrician. His dad was a union electrician. He still has he still carries his card. He was in the union 16, 17 years before he got hired on by Bank of America.
No kidding.
But like that's a whole career.
Oh, he was at Cummins first? Is that where you got him from?
No, he was with PP1 in Kansas City.
Interesting.
But
So you
that's a
moved-
whole profession, and like there are kids that grow up that like know nothing about like getting into the trades, and like if you think about how much of a gap we have in skilled workforce, like that's a whole area. Like my nephew, he's a union right now, pipe fitter for DSI here in Austin, and like just having the conversations about the different paths that exist. That's what I want to do, is just focus the podcast on interviewing. And I have a list of people that I've worked with or people that I grew up with that have been successful that are in different industries to just tell their story. And then I'm going to partner with my local high school and other high schools in that area where they'll play the podcast for the kids, whether it's during one of the class periods and things like that.
So let's talk about that podcast, because
The lighthouse.
That's what it's going to be called? The lighthouse.
The lighthouse.
So tell me, I think I could arrive at where it's the darkness and that's the light.
Shining a light to
help guide you.
To
it's a
help guide you.
waypoint.
Yeah,
Right?
it's a waypoint.
So for you, are you focused on, like, I'm super focused on veterans, but I'm also only super focused on the digital infrastructure industry, which is also referred to as the mission critical industry or the data center industry, right? So I'm laser focused on those two things. You're focused on, you said children that come from disadvantaged
communities where they may not necessarily have exposure to career professionals. Either they don't have one in the home, they don't have one in the family, and so they don't know of the different paths. Like obviously, I think based on when I get started, I'm going to rely on my social circle, if you will, to interview professionals, and so there's probably going to be an influx of like people that are in the industry market or that are in the trades or that are in construction.
Yeah, so people in your market.
But that even some of the people that I grew up with, that I went to high school with, there's some extremely successful people that are just in completely different industries that I think it'd be fantastic for people to even know that these industries even exist.
So it's just a more wide-spreading, overarching, like holistically, you're trying to say there's a lot of things out there that you may not be aware of.
100%. That's exactly it.
So it's not just data center. I get it. And you're going to use those other guests of your podcast to help introduce them to that vertical.
Yes, 100%.
So you'll cover the data center side and bring on other people from the group, and then you'll start going to the other folks that also, like you, grew up in disadvantaged
100%.
neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And maybe some medical law or some other
100%. Yeah,
okay.
no, that's the goal. And so I have a list of people like Albert Montano, for example. He's the first guy.
What's he do now?
He's a operations manager at a power plant in El Paso.
Oh wow! How do you get through that? Through the trades, through school?
No. He got his mechanical engineering degree at UTEP. Got his MBA at UTEP. Got into El Paso Electric on the construction side. Actually, was their owner's rep, building these large power plants. Got on the operations side. He's one of the youngest facility managers that they have in the company, and he's extremely successful. He's
how old?
Like 38.
Gotcha.
Very, very successful. Hardworking dude, man. Incredibly smart.
I think that your timing for what you're doing could not be better, and I'll explain why. Right. So our industry as a whole is behind. I mean, the growth rate of labor has been like approximately proportionate to inflation, or it's about 3 to 4%. But we have about 85,000 people that we're short in this industry between now and 2025.
That's amazing.
So in we only are a few short years away. And what we haven't accounted for is that there's more than 45% of our workforce. Like, how long have you been in the industry?
18 years.
Okay. And I've been in for about the same. Did you know that more than 45% of our industry has been here for more than 20?
That's crazy now.
So right now we have, that means there's people that are within the next 5 years likely to retire.
Yeah.
So that's the silver tsunami that our industry is.
You're starting to see it now.
We are.
I mean, you're starting to see some of the legends starting to retire.
How crazy is that? Because I'm like going through my...
Sad. It makes me like...
But they were influenced. I mean,
huge influence on huge.
100%. There are people like, I did a podcast with Dean Nelson, and I was like, dude, I've known of that guy, like Scott Nobu. I'm like, remember when we first got into space, there were names that were prevalent that we heard 100%. Of, and you're like, I don't know who those people are, but they 100%. Sound like they move the needle, 100%. Right? And this graduating class is like not that, I mean, Kava could be there for the next 10 years for all I know, but he's at that level of
he was
influence.
A celebrity before. I remember I probably made an ass out of myself, but I remember the first time I met him because, I mean, I worked at Google almost 10 years.
How did you go? Well, let's go back to that. So how did you go from Bank of America to Google?
I moved over to the operations side, and so Bank of America was going through the process of, at the time, eventually outsourcing all of their project management. Now all their project management happens through CBRE, but they were doing it in waves. And one of the first adjustments that they did is they reorged and they moved a couple of us over to the operations side. And at the time, I was voluntold, if you will, that this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Looking back, it's the best thing that could have ever happened.
A lot of exposure.
Not only exposure, but all of a sudden, I was responsible for half of the data centers in the U.S. Two of their biggest ones I built. One, Kansas City as a GC, Coit as the actual PM. And now I'm having to deal and manage with operational challenges, access issues, things breaking because construction didn't necessarily put it in perfect order when it was turned over. And so talk about like humbling, like eating crow on like why things are the way they are. It's project management. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, when you think of like that whole ethos or like the whole culture of operations and construction, you have competing interests, man. On one side, you don't care about how long it takes. You want it done right and you want it done perfect because you have to deal with it for 20 years. On the other side, like you're a cost center, and the quicker you finish your project and the faster that you get finished, the quicker that asset starts generating revenue for the business, right? And so there's a lot of pressure to be done. And if you can convince operations to, hey, we can work through these quirks, we can work through these problems.
They're your customer, and now you're the customer.
And so now I'm the customer and running buildings that I built. And so from that perspective, it just gave me so much perspective, and I think it made me a better construction person. But I did that for almost 3 years. It's a different life. Like you're on call 24 hours a day. Bank does all of their maintenance in the weekends. You probably remember working Saturday nights, Sunday nights. At the time, I was dating my now wife, and so every time, we would be on dates, and I would literally get a phone call.
Sorry, baby, I gotta go.
And I would stay outside of a restaurant, a club, a friend's house. The first time I ever introduced her to my friends, it was a birthday party for a club here in Dallas for one of our friends, and I literally about an hour in, I'm like, I got a call, and it was Steven. He was working at Siwa, and I had to step out, and I literally left her with my friends the whole night while I was outside in the parking lot, like working through an issue. And so I knew, I was like, okay, I need to find something that, like, I miss construction, I miss that world. That was what I felt I was really good at. And so I started just looking around, and Google was hiring. I didn't know anybody. I literally submitted my application into the black box. And I remember being at dinner with my wife. At the time, she was just my girlfriend. I was maybe the second or third time I had met her parents. And the caller ID on the cell phone says Google. And I'm like, oh, shit.
And you're at dinner with the family.
Yeah. So I'm like, I got to take this. So I stepped out, and it was a recruiter. And we had like an impromptu interview with the recruiter while I'm on the parking lot of Seasons. If you remember it today, I was at Seasons 52 in Plano. And she was having dinner with her family. And yeah.
And did they... it was just the interview, or
it was an interview. The whole process took about 7 months.
Yeah, it's a long time.
They first wanted to hire me on as a TVC, as a consultant, very similar to your world. That's what they wanted to do. And at the time, I wasn't ready to do that. I had a good job with bank. I was uncertain about the whether or not it would turn into something. So I was like, hey, I'd like to try to interview for a full-time position. And they said, okay, we're gonna have to restart the process, because up to that point, all my interviews were via phone.
Oh, gotcha.
And now you have to fly in and do the whole round in interviews. And so I was like, I think it's worth it. And at the time, I worked for Anu. And so Anu kind of made the comment about, well, hey, if you come in and do well, the process is a lot easier versus if you interview and you have one bad interview, like that's it.
So you're saying he's like, take the stepping stone.
Take the stepping stone. And without saying it, and I was like, no, like I'm gonna bet on myself. Like I'm happy where I'm at. So let's go through this interviews. And I felt like it was a blessing. Like one of the interviews was with the same person that I had a phone screen with. And so I had a little bit of practice, and he was the toughest one. Jeff Wyant, who's Brian Nagel's peer on the West Coast. But he was at one point head of all of ops. Very ex-Navy nuke, like super intense, incredibly intelligent. He just reamed you during an interview. So I had a little bit of practice.
Sounds like
a
Navy nuke.
And so I got super prepared. So yeah, I went through the interview process, and eventually... when I started the interview, they had 3 positions they were hiring for: South Carolina, Omaha, and Pryor. We had listed them as Omaha 1, South Carolina 2, Pryor 3. And by the time I got
like your dream sheet order,
out of the order,
you'd rather go to that one.
Yeah, because at the time I wasn't engaged yet, and so my girlfriend was looking at because she was working in the neonatal ICU, and so she was looking at just hospitals and where had where was the bigger market for her. And so that went into the decision. By the time I got the offer, Striffler had already been hired in Omaha, and they had already filled the position in South Carolina. So they offered me the position in Pryor. And I'm like, okay, I obviously took the job.
Tulsa sounds amazing. You know,
at the time, I looked at it as like, this is going to be a sacrifice. I'm going to maybe not be the happiest. I ended up proposing. When I got the offer, I didn't accept it right away. I ended up proposing first. That was already in the works. It just worked out timing-wise where I was able to propose and then accept the job. But we loved our time in Tulsa.
I think it's beautiful.
My kids were born in Tulsa. My dog's from Tulsa. We're happy to come back to Dallas because
it's a pretty cosmo town.
But it has everything. Best way to describe it, it has everything you need. Maybe not everything you want, but everything you need. And the people are just fantastic. Like I loved my time in Tulsa. I really enjoyed working in Pryor. The people there, I think, just
You had my old engineer, John Tulliver.
John, I never actually worked with him. He came in after I had left already back to Dallas. But he works with all of my.
He was a
buddies.
buzzsaw. I worked for him in the military. I have respect for him, obviously, but I got to go on some deployments with him. I know how intense those guys could be, right? For reasons like they're just conditioned in the military. Like every mistake is career limiting. Any bad mistake is life and death, right? So the intensity level, it's the greatest strength and we are our own worst. Our biggest strength is always our greatest
100%.
weakness, and sometimes we're our own worst enemy, right? So you could take some really, really smart people together. They just have to find that right social dynamic,
And that campus is huge. I mean, that's a little city. There's 15, 16 buildings all within the campus. It's spread across 2 campuses. It's a massive city.
When you went up there for operations, though?
Oh, I went up for construction. So I was
So who
there.
else was there, Matt?
No, I was the first. There was a gentleman named Carl Tharp that was running.
Who replaced you?
Travis Bright.
Okay, so I mean, like, I've only seen him on video.
He's a big dude.
He played pro football.
Oh,
right?
yeah, he's amazing.
He played ball at like
huge dude.
BYU. So.
Yeah, incredibly smart.
Played for the Cowboys, didn't he?
Played for the Cowboys. One of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your life.
People always describe him
He's
as the nicest person, but one of the most intimidating.
Yeah, he's super big. So like he's just incredibly tall. When he shakes your hand, it's just like. But he is one of the nicest human beings. Like, just let alone like his personality, his approach. He's just a really nice human being.
You can tell that when you talk to him.
Oh, 100%. 100%. So yeah, he replaced me, which was fantastic. It allowed me to we kind of trade places. So he was here at DPR and living in DFW with his family.
Oh, that's right.
So they moved up to Tulsa, and me and my family moved down to Midlothian, and it was a perfect trade, and allowed me to get back to Texas. And
what was your favorite part of working there?
Yeah, it's getting exposure to the people. Like I mean, think about it from this perspective.
Well, I'm saying like exposure to people is great, but the massive volume of stuff that you got to be exposed to.
Nuts. I mean, getting to build just north of 800 megawatts in 6 years, like
it's ridiculous.
Managing $8 to $10 billion between I was 29 and 36, like
it's ridiculous.
It's nuts, and like the responsibility that I had when I probably wasn't ready for it, to be honest with you.
Do you talk shit to LD and be like, "Bitch, remember when you were thinking you were shit hot at $1 billion a year?"
Yeah,
I pick my teeth with that.
But it's a different level. Like,
I know you can't talk shit.
It's uncomparable. Like it's the challenge. For example, like now, right? Like coming in, we're building at a much smaller scale. But the problem is, I mean, you own it end to end, right? That's been one of the biggest changes for me is there you had, maybe not when I started because we were much smaller, but towards the end of when I left Google, like we had a team for everything. And like when you're operating at that crazy scale, you had just incredibly talented people to help you with anything that you needed to get done. And so you ended up becoming a little bit of like,
an SME, it sounds
correct. Like. And like you're just a steward and a shepherd to help the process along. Here you have very, very tight, nimble teams that touch it all. And so like the breadth and scope that you touch, it's so much wider. It's such a smaller scale because you're doing a percentage of the volume.
Yeah.
But you're touching everything. I mean, you're in legal discussions. I mean, probably your world as you stepped into running your own business. Like you're having, I'm having conversations where I'm like
discussions, not just data center project discussions.
These are new discussions for me that I am extremely grateful that like somebody like LD, for example, that's been doing this for my whole time at Google. He was in this position having these conversations already for 10 years.
Yeah.
That I have that as like a sounding board. Like, hey, here's the discussion. Here's where I'm headed. And usually it's like, yeah, and he'll give me a little bit of feedback, but
I think what he and John
it's a different scale.
It's a different thing too. Not to
100%.
trivialize the enterprise side of what you were building at, but it's like I think you used the term earlier. It's like a cost center type of thing, and I think CyrusOne transformed the wholesale operator side or the data center co-location side in general by turning the product into speed and volume.
Oh, 100%.
It was all volume and velocity. And they did that by like, do you really give a shit what the engine is or what if it's this design versus that design, your SLA is going to be the same. They did a good job of turning the market, I think, at that point. And he was in the saddle.
It was to the point where when I met, I mean, for example, when I met LD,
When did you meet him?
they had just done Goliath, and they had just put all their. They made a really good video, and it was all over LinkedIn.
It was a monster of a program.
And
yeah.
at the time, Brett, Brett was our director.
Mm-hmm.
He had just gotten promoted to oversee all of the Americas. I remember Brett asking the question if anybody knew anybody at Cyrus, because he wanted to ask questions about like how did they do Goliath, like what they did and the time frame that they did was just nuts.
It was
like it was industry leading.
Mm-hmm.
And Brett's one of those guys that's just as intense, just as like he's like I need to figure out how to. Oh yeah, he's amazing. Like he's one of those people that are just incredible. And I didn't know Laramie, but I knew Brant knew Laramie. And Brant I've known since Bank of America days. So I reached out to Brant and I'm like, hey, do you know that guy Laramie at Cyrus One? And it's funny, they're obviously really close friends. And I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I can introduce you. Sure. Like, yeah, what do you need?
I see Brant saying like, you can play coy. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I can do that. What do you need? And I was like, well, no, I told him like, why? And he's like, yeah, give me. So he sends a text. And dude, LD offered to jump on a call with literally our whole construction organization and literally talk through how they did everything, and then sit through about 45 minutes of like grilling questions. Well, did you do this? Did you buy equipment? How did you approach inventory? How did you approach design? And just answered every question. It was like calm and like there was no whether there was an NDA in place or not, whether or not there was any competition. Like
it didn't matter because you still have to lead. You have to do it.
He literally just sat there, and like after that, I obviously got connected to him via phone. And we just kept in touch. I mean, we knew a lot of the similar people. He's from DFW as well.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually meet him in person. This is a funny story until his birthday party.
Oh, no kidding?
Yeah. So we had this like text message relationship for probably
everybody
10 years.
Yeah.
And it was when like Aina left. I remember sending a text like, "Hey, I'm gonna introduce you to somebody. If there's a person that I know can help you, it's gonna be LD. Like he knows everybody. As you're hiring their people, he's gonna probably know of them." And I remember sending a text like, "Aina meet Laramie, Laramie meet Aina, two people I respect incredibly in the industry." Next thing you know, I'm getting a phone call like 6 months later, like, "Hey, I'm gonna hire LD." Like, hell yeah.
Shit.
Like, hell yeah. That's like,
I remember when he told you.
That's like freaking market moving, man.
But like, honestly, like none of us even knew who Yondr was until LD went there. Right. And I'm not trivializing all those other guys from Google.
I mean, they started in Europe and it makes sense. Like,
but think about it like this. And I think this is the reason why guys like John and LD never really worried about what they were telling people is because you still had to have the right team to execute.
100%.
And it takes certain, not everybody, think about the power that you guys have. You know, Chad,
Alejandra,
LT, you know what I'm saying? But like, think of the talent that you're able to pull together to do that. I mean, you could have the greatest recipe in the world, but you still need a good chef, right? And it doesn't matter if your means and methods are transparent. You still need that human element, you know, to bring things together. And that's one of those things that he's always been able to do is kind of create a little orbit around him.
100%. You know? No, and I told him that straight out. Recently, we had a pretty good conversation the other night, and I told him, I go, honestly, like one of the biggest reasons why I chose Yondr, because I had a few other opportunities, was him. I mean, I knew my strengths. I knew the value that I could bring, but I also knew my weaknesses. Like I had been in a role for 9 years that was very, very specific. Kind of you said SME, right? Very focused on execution at a campus level. Now all of a sudden executing in a remote role, executing across multiple campuses, leading teams that may not necessarily be all FTEs, some consultants, some not. But knowing that like he was there, he had that experience, and just like his approach, super humble, like willing to answer any question.
Pretty unassuming guy.
Unassuming guy. Like he's the right, like I knew culturally, like however this works out, I knew 4 years from that day, I was going to be way better off, regardless of how this all plays out. I knew I was going to grow. And so that for me was like, if he wasn't there, I don't know, honestly, if I would have left Google. Because I didn't leave. It's kind of like my old boss, Scott Robertson, who's another one of my mentors. Like when I was making this decision, he asked, are you running away from something or are you running to something? And that's such a good way to think about like a life day changing decision like that. And it was 100%. Like I was running
Well,
to something.
So think about it, right? Your first opportunity in college you got was not your first choice, right? And then you went to go work for that customer. Yeah, I mean, as a GC, you went to work for the GC's customer, and then, so now you're on the enterprise end user side. Then you go to one of the largest players in our space, and
spent almost a decade there.
And now you're at the dyslexic version of Google, which would be I'm not saying Yondr's a startup by any means. Obviously, they're monsters, like you said. They're well known. I think that we just didn't hear about them a lot in the U.S. Once I looked into them, I'm like, this is a big company.
They're smaller scale.
But from not that they're a startup or anything like that, but like look at the team that you guys are pulling together. And now as who half our clients are operators, the other half are enterprise, don't think at most of those meetings when we get down there, like, hey, what do you guys heard anything about Yondr? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's because the team they collected. Everyone's like, something's going to happen. They have all the right talent over there. I remember reaching out to one of the guys at Uber. I was like, well, the guy that ran all of Cyrus One's delivery now runs the global delivery platform for Yondr. And that was an instant, they're qualified then to deliver any of our product. Doesn't that make sense? It's crazy.
It's amazing what the who, like.
They're like, why didn't you just tell us? That, like, it's not even who Yondr is. They're like, okay, we may not be as familiar with them, but we know who those people are. We're familiar with them.
When you look at like the resume of body of work that like the team that he's enabled has brought together, put together.
Alejandro, yeah,
it's just insane.
Talent.
It's that's what attracted me. Like that was it's a
good team,
and I wanted to learn. Like I wanted to be challenged, and I wanted to. I'm young enough, kind of like...
That is a challenge, shifting from a Google to...
Well, it's interesting because I look at like your resume and you've made like a lot of some questions I wanted to ask, like what were your decision points when you left? Because you've done...
I normally spend 2 years.
2 or 3 years.
Normally 2.
And I know for you it was different though. Like you had... I mean, you beat the shit out of cancer, which was fucking amazing. And like that just changes your mindset though about how you... And I remember hearing you in a podcast say like...
So like an enlistment.
Yeah, like you think about it differently.
But I always told people in advance, like... Hey man, I'm only going to be here for a few years. You sure you want this? Because I'm pretty disruptive in the way that I'm going to approach it. I'm not a big Band-Aid guy, so I'm like, I don't think you are. I don't think guys like LD and all those other guys, like, they're like, why? Why would we do it like that? And I was like, if I come in, it's going to be for change, 100%. Right? And then I'm going to be gone in 2 years. You sure you want all that? And some guys would say, yeah. I'm like, look, if we're having a good run, maybe I'll re-enlist, I guess, for another couple. But
that's such a good analogy, by the way.
But that's how I view it, right? And I still view my life like that. Like, someone was giving me shit. Normally, I could count on like GT and LD and those guys to ride my ass the most, but I still get shit on for that. People are like, why are you always changing? Can you not keep a fucking job? And I was like, why would I do the same thing my whole life? Like, I never understand that. I understand that's the way the society kind of grooms us, but I'm like, life is fucking short, man. I want to go do, like, I loved what I did when I was a PM at Eaton when I met you, and I loved when like, there's a lot of cool things I've got to do, but like, that's not all I want to do. It's the same reason why, like, I was going to re-enlist on the submarine, and guys like, what are you going to do? More of this? You've already done it. You're not going to have more fun than what you just did. I was lucky to be on the submarine.
100%.
So I'm like, okay, well then I guess that party's over. Time to go to the next party, right? So this is the first time where I'm like, I can't believe I made it to my 3-year anniversary. Maybe it's because
it's different now that you run your own place, but yes.
But I'm like, but this is, I'm reinventing our business 100%. Every couple of years. Every couple of years we change. We're completely different than when we started. And like, I'd like to think like I am at a brand new startup every year. It's just now we're emerging.
And as much as you're growing too, I mean, you guys have tripled in the last year and a half.
Yeah, 300%.
Like the company you run today is completely different than it was a year ago.
100%.
That's probably why you feels like, well, you haven't changed. You are.
Yeah, maybe that's it. I just wanted to not spend what could be potentially one of the first days of the last 2 years of my life doing something that wasn't inspiring. And I needed to work. I remember when I first left, Shap was like, why the hell would you leave? And I was like, that's a good question. You have to understand, even you, when you made your change, if you were to go back, if you peeled that onion all the way back, you're going to arrive at what matters most. Right? What matters most is what you are going to be driven to go do, and then you're going to rationalize that with all the things that you're capable of doing around it. And for me, I spent my whole career trying to recapture what I had when I was in the military. And what I was able to codify it down to was I just loved working with and working for people that I would die for and that would die for me, right? And that was the standard. That became it. And the standard's defined by that, but it's really measured against what we tolerate against it. So like, if you look at my leadership team, not only would I die for them, but I would help them bury a body, right? So that unit that you get to be a part of, where you feel like it's a real community and it's a real tribe or a real culture, a real unit, that's the change that I was talking about. Not just in the signs of going from Google to Yondr, but now you're a part of a really elite unit, right? Of people that are massively capable. Like whatever you task Chad with, you know that you could fire and forget.
Hands down, yeah.
Anything you task, like anything, they're all massively capable. They just chose to take their talents there, which is going to give Yondr the ultimate long-term advantage, which is why these other operators are like, what's Yondr up to? And I'm like, I honestly don't know. They know I know LD, but I don't call him and ask him about it.
No, for sure. No, I hope so, dude. I think for me, that boils down to like, I wanted to feel uncomfortable again.
Are you?
I am, absolutely. Like I got into the point where, I mean, I think about, like I tell the story and I think about, I had one of the best managers I've ever had. And I worked for him for almost all of the 10 years, Scott Robertson.
Okay.
He is hands down like one of the best managers. And I've only worked for LD now for 3 years, so we'll see. So far, no complaints, right? But Scott was just incredible.
3 months.
I had literally, like, I knew blind trust, like that one. Didn't matter what mistake I made, as long as I was honest and transparent about here's why I made that decision and here's my logic, whether it's stupid or flawed. All of a sudden, it became his problem to go deal with. Like, we had no questions asked. Like, when you have that trust that your manager, who pulls a ton of weight, is going to have that, like, have your back like that, like, it empowers you and invigorates you to go take on the world. I had a team that was like, I mean, Steven, Marcus, Travis, like, the team that I had here in Midlothian was like second to none. It was in a good place, but I also got into the point where I had entertained a few options, entertained a electric car manufacturer gig. I entertained another owner-operator gig for a little bit. And each time, like, I felt like something was missing, and I think it was like that feeling of I wasn't challenged anymore. Like, I was part of a huge machine and doing some huge things, but I'd been doing that now and I think I had stopped getting kind of more
you hit a
and
plateau.
more.
We all do.
And amazing people. I mean, the pay was fantastic. The people were incredible. I don't really have like any complaints other than like I really wanted to feel uncomfortable again. I really wanted to feel challenged.
That's good.
And this right opportunity came at the right time. And every time I looked at leaving, what always kept me was the team. Like my team, my family. The way you described your unit, that always what kept me at Google. And when I got this opportunity, talking to LD, talking to Aina, he had me talk to Chad and had me talk to Alejandro. I was like, okay, like if there's anything that's going to be as close to what I think I can be my true self, like I can wear, kind of like when I came in and I'm like, dude, I love your shoes. Like, I mean, first day on the job, I literally freaking wore my Jordans to work. Like,
sure, why not?
Where else can I do that and be me? I was there. And so it just felt it was the right combination of a place where I'm going to learn. I'm going to feel incredibly uncomfortable. I get to be me every day. And that's...
But you're learning how to build a product that's the primary line of business that you use to generate revenue. 100%. So the way that they look at the cost and the speed...
It's completely...
It's
different. Like a perfect example. If I were to ever, and not saying that I would, but if I were to ever go back to any kind of hyperscaler, there's so many things that I would want to do differently now, only being here 3 months. Like, because it's just the way you just described it, like the way LD's approach to how you think of a design and how you really get it down to, does it meet reliability and availability? Does it meet the intent? Does it serve the purpose? Is it repeatable? Is it reliable? And can you be dependable in your execution of that? Like, because the more variability, the slower you go. And we said a lot of that when I was at Google. We're wanting to get down to that, but we're such a huge machine that it's so hard to turn the ship, right? Like, it's such a big ship. If you turn it fast enough, it capsizes. Here, you're small enough still and nimble enough, and everybody's on the same sheet of music where, like, I'm excited about like what the
your
potential
agility is going to be crazy.
And what we can do. And so that for me was all right. Like, I know regardless of how this turns out, which I know, I mean, like I'm following people that just are going to be successful no matter what happens. But I know 4 years from now, Alfonso is going to be in a better place experience wise. And, regardless of how this plans out.
Well, let's shift gears back to, your podcast that you're going to launch. And, I was talking about the labor challenge, and your audience is really these people back in these not disenfranchised, but maybe they don't have as much opportunity as, other markets.
100%.
And those are people that are like looking for a meaningful and purposeful opportunity that they could be inspired and they feel safe like you do to make those mistakes and have someone block and tackle for you. It's amazing how much more you could grow professionally when you're not afraid of failing, because most of the things you learn are from those failures, not from the things that you learned in theory, right? And then it's not just how much more you grow, but it's how much more productive you are, right? And if you could find an environment that allows these people, these kids, to discover a roadmap to get into this space, to realize that they could find all those things that you found
100%
here, right? And their timing couldn't be better. And this is the part that I was going to with some numbers, right? But more than half of not more than half, let's say 45 to 50% of our industry is what they call aging, and they're expecting that silver tsunami in the next few years. But let's say that's half of our industry. And our industry right now is, let's just say 2 million people globally. That's 1 million people checking out. Plus we have 85,000 people to add.
Crazy.
So there needs to be a solution for labor, right? And the industry itself is going through consolidations left and right. But there's going to be some consolidations on the labor side, right? And you're going to be able to talk to people that didn't realize that not only did this industry exist, they know, they all have phones, they just don't understand what it ties to. But at the end, it all ends at a data center, right? So when they could connect that dots, and hopefully your podcast can do that, they'll be able to understand like you did, like, okay, well, I don't have to Google what the highest paying job is. These people are telling me that not only does this pay well, but they enjoy what they're doing enough to want us to be a part of it, where you could be a patent attorney, but then sit down next to one who's like, if I could give you any advice, is to not do this, right? Where everyone in this industry that I talk to is
I would tell you tomorrow to jump in it. Like
this
tomorrow,
is the greatest industry.
100%.
It's the Wild Wild West.
And the path, like, I mean,
you can do anything.
Perfect example, like my older brother, when he got into the industry, I remember telling him, like, hey, like, when you start, you have to pay your dues, you have to grind, but your progression is exponential as long as you put in the time
and you're willing to work. This is an industry that rewards.
It doesn't matter whether you come in on the sub side, whether you come in on the GC side, on the owner side. It doesn't matter. Like, if you are willing to work and you're willing to be honest, transparent, but have grit, like, dude, the sky's the limit, man. Like, it doesn't matter what side you're on.
There's 230 different jobs available in our industry, spread across 9 different domains. I can consider it 7 different domains, but in that, there's really 3 different groups you get to go work for, right? You're either going to work for an enterprise end user, an operator, or the ecosystem. And the ecosystem's the design teams, the construction teams. I'm on the ecosystem. You're on the operator side, but you came from the enterprise. Does that make sense?
100%.
When you could help people understand the landscape of the industry easier, then they can navigate through it better. And the more that they navigate to the right spot, they gravitate to what they do best, then we could effectively drive the potential output of this whole industry up. Right? We just need to have that collective, in my opinion.
100%. No, you're spot on.
But you're going to hit a community that's probably untapped. Like, I'm hitting an untapped community too.
Oh, it's, what gave me the spark was when I was at Google, we launched, and I just saw the LinkedIn post for the first time. We did this whole initiative internally.
What is it?
We called it, at the time, we called it Project Leap, and it was to provide a leap of like a way of life for people. And it started with a coworker of mine, Michael Fahim. He had just gone to a museum, and he was kind of like, just didn't realize like how kind of that concept of there's people that grow up that not knowing that this is even an opportunity for them.
Or they're growing up now. Like, you're going to be talking to kids about our industry.
They have no idea what it is.
Not only that, but by the time they graduate or arrive to the industry, there'll be jobs that don't exist yet that they'll be able to get 100%. Into.
And so we started this whole idea, like, how do we provide that message? And it probably took us a year of like meeting once a week to try to figure it out. And Google was incredible in supporting us financially to do nothing to do with our job. What we eventually put together, and it was a group of about 10 of us. Brett, before he left, was actually our sponsor. Before he left, one of the last things he approved for us to go spend money on. But what it is now is they're doing a trial in South Carolina where they partnered with a fiber contractor that is recruiting in high schools that are socially diseconomical and saying, hey, come join us. Starting pay is $25 an hour, and learn how to become a fiber professional. You can through the apprenticeship. It's a 1-year program. You get your Bixby certification. You get your installer certification, and if you get through the process, they're doing a lot of the work for the Google campus. You get to come work for this pay. And I mean, the pay is phenomenal. And so
it's a great way.
They're now going into the high schools and starting to do recruiting and starting to do the talking. And it's through that evolution of like, when you go have this conversation, just the amount of questions you get are like, wait a minute, it pays what?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I don't need a college degree.
Exactly.
Are you telling me I can yeah. And it's like you pay, you learn, you get paid while you're going to school. And when you're done with this, you have a certificate that you can take anywhere. Like, just opening the door to how many different industries, and that's just one example. Like going to college. I remember doing college boot camps, for example, for some of my friends and coworkers' kids, where they didn't even know where to start. Like, it's like, okay, how do I apply? How does financial aid work? I
love how you're bringing it all back to your challenges when you were.
And so it's like, yeah, like if I knew, like I had to figure it out. Like I just had to figure it out. But if you can provide a path and like and so the idea of a podcast, especially a visual podcast where people can maybe see and feel and connect, like, hey, that person, like, not only does he sound like me, he's from a place where I'm from, and he even looks like me. Like,
sure,
there's no reason why I can't be that person.
Do you feel like I believe that podcasts will one day be the primary source of information that people go to?
Oh, 100%.
To learn
100%. Like if I want to learn about anything right now, I do it from a podcast 100%. or the internet. Like,
yeah, but I mean, like, there are people that we know that are just subject matter. They're good at what, and they're an authority of some kind, and that I know that if they're saying it, then it's probably. Plus, you get to unpackage more in a long version podcast, even like this one. Like, there's going to be people now. Like, I have no idea the impact. I don't even look and see who listens to all these things. Like, sometimes, like, people be like, hey, what's the highest one that's ever been? Like, because there's like a competition, a couple guys like, who has the highest rated one? I'm like, I don't know, and I don't care. I know that we're putting down as much good information as we can to reach as large of an audience as we can. And we know that there's people that are going to listen, that are going to relate to you or any of our other guests, and they're gonna align themselves to something because you've laid out a roadmap of how you did it. And now they're going to kind of take a piece out of your playbook, right? And you never know the changes these podcasts make on any people, but I've had really cool stories where people are like, dude, you're not going to believe what we did. I mean, I think you were telling me
100%, yeah.
And it's about what kind of impact your podcast is going to make, because you won't even know how you're stirring you'll stir the pot, but you won't know what's taking place. But it is rewarding some days when you find out like how it stimulated someone to make a change, or how it led to them, growing in this way professionally. And I've had cool people have sent me cool texts or something, and my thing is what's your objective? What's your intent? Because you have an audience that you want to reach and you want to share your story. Because if you had that story, how much further, not that you're not light years ahead of where most people are, but imagine how you would have arrived if you had kind of a recipe card instead of cooking for yourself.
100%, man. I mean, I think a perfect one example of like where I think it's important. Like I listened to your podcast with Sam before I ever met Sam. Sam Huckabee.
Awesome guy, though.
An incredible guy. And I don't think I would have, and I met him for the first time just recently. And I don't know if I would have approached him, had a conversation with him. Because I mean, when you meet somebody that's of his position, like you're just not going to be, how many times does a guy like that probably get approach to whatever?
Exactly.
But watching his podcast, just you realize like how much of a human being he is, and just how humble and like he's just that down to earth and super chill.
Hand to God, last night I'm in with my team at the compound, and Stock from my team, who listened to one of Sam's podcasts, ripped out some famous quote from Sam that had a lot of meaningful impact at the time and what he said. And I'm like, where'd you get that from? He's like, Sam on his podcast. And I was like, I'm so happy that they took something from that of value.
100%. And so like it allowed me to feel comfortable, because I wouldn't have approached him, and I did. And we had this whole like long conversation. I was actually in New Orleans, and like he was there for doing his thing with Advantage, and it was just, he had just gotten promoted. And so it was really cool. Like had this whole conversation about how he, I didn't even know he got promoted because he didn't turn it on. And he was like, why? He's like, yeah, I don't, he's not he's not about that.
Very unassuming
unassuming guy. And so like, it's just really, really good discussion that I don't know if I would have had I wouldn't have wanted to bother him if it wasn't for like your podcast. Just it showed the human side of him, which is
Well, there's people right now that feel that same way about you.
I hope not.
But listen, man, when you were at Google, I mean, I felt horrible every time because you were in a position where everyone was probably trying to call into you all the time. And I'm like, I don't want it to be like that. We'll be friends again when you don't work there, type of thing, right? But
I tried so hard to like not, like
No, it's
so
hard.
incredibly hard. From like,
it's a lot of pressure you have in those roles. I get it. But there's people that don't know how to engage you, or there's guys in this industry that just stumbled into it and they just stumbled onto this podcast. And then maybe in 3 months from now, and maybe they're from your community or,
oh, I hope they come up to me.
well, I hope that they can.
100%.
So in what ways can I help you with that podcast? Like get it rolling, get it launched?
No, I mean, obviously, I've been asking a lot of questions before this started about how this setup works and how
Sure.
I've been looking up like how much does a microphone cost? What kind of what kind of software do I need? And
I started by having my admin go and research everything that Rogan put in his podcast studio. I'm like, I just want to match it. And I'm like, then I came back. I was like,
you do realize he has the #1 rated podcast in the
dude, you can't compete with the Fear Factor guy, right? So I just was like, all right, well, that's what I want to strive to. It's actually not as bad as I thought, but I was like, I'll reward myself with growth and success
100%.
by allowing me to have something like that. Maybe one day. I even talked to these guys. I'm like, if I wanted you to build something out for me, could you? And like 100%.
That's awesome.
And I mean, I thought about shifting it, but honestly, they do such a great job of producing everything and managing all the brain damage that goes into it. And plus, there's a lot of little things they could do to help. So it made sense being here. But I do think that what you're trying to do is touch. We share the same goal. You're trying to touch an untapped community of resources that could have a real meaningful change in this
100%.
industry. And they just don't know it because they don't know.
They don't know what they don't know.
Listen, man, I think that a lot of us are still coming out of that hangover phase in which like you have to have a college degree to be successful. And I'm like, how many people do we know in this space?
100%.
Some of my best friends haven't stepped foot a day on their campus and they would go toe to toe with a PE or anybody else on any. And it's just tribal. Nothing that we really ever learned in college actually applied us to what we're doing here. And it's no different from what you get in the military. You learn a lot of things, advanced weapons, machinery, tech, all those things, but it doesn't necessarily mean you know data centers, but that it does give you a foundation to build off of that and acclimate into faster, I think.
It all depends on like where you are at that given point and what you need to mature to get you to the point where you're ready to take on whatever.
Will you put together like a collective of other mentors that could help contribute to some of these people?
100%. Like that's my goal is like to, as I interview people, is to start to build a collective of people that if somebody's passionate about, like I really want to interview like Steven, for example, and not, what's funny is I don't want to interview him for his experience getting to Google. I actually want to interview him for his experience and his path of becoming a union electrician.
Yeah.
I mean, he was
amazing trade.
He was one of the youngest superintendents. He was a superintendent in his early 20s, a full force master electrician running full scale projects at like 25 years old.
That's fantastic. I saw Nathan.
Like that, Nathan, perfect example. Like he came up to the trade, like just hearing their story of like he knew from the very beginning that he was going to be an electrician because his grandpa and his dad were.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible career. And like, so
electricians make good money too.
Incredible money. And like they have job security forever. Like,
especially if you're a union, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously he's made the transition now and is at Google and is extremely successful. But I think his story will relate to so many people that are thinking of maybe getting into the industry, maybe wanting to get into union, wanting to be an electrician. And like he has that story of like he's, incredibly successful now.
I think that those stories, your story, and the fact that our industry is starving for people and
100%.
talent right now.
100%.
And my message to any of the people that listen to your podcast is our industry doesn't really lack genius or intelligence, right? It lacks character and leadership and things of that nature. And if you have the aptitude to learn and the ability to work hard, there's enough people in the space that'll immerse you in an opportunity where you can drink from any fire hose you want
100%.
and learn as much as you can. And that's the limit, right? It's not based on where you went to school and how many different acronyms you have, right? And I would say that those people that are in those markets, they need to know that we need them. And we need the trades, we need high school grads, we need college grads, we need military. And we need to bring on as much of that inclusion as we can because it'll advance the industry.
Dude, 100%. I feel like and you probably feel this way too. I'm a result of a collection of mentors that whether they knew they were mentoring me or not, took the time to invest their time, their attention, and or give me opportunities that maybe I wasn't ready for, but they took the risk to say, yeah, we're gonna let's make this decision.
You should have a podcast too with your mentors. Like I'm flying in one of mine, a chief that I worked for.
Who
Who
deep?
Huh?
I feel like I'd get emotional.
Oh well, don't think I won't. Right, I'm bringing on an old master chief of mine that I haven't talked to in years. I talked to him like a month ago, and he's coming in like March. And that guy had one of the most profound impacts on me. Right, I mean, he kind of made a difference whether or not I spent a night in the brig or in my barracks, you know, that type of thing. And I don't think he knew that, right? He didn't know. He was just doing his job and being a good chief and being a good leader. But I do think that what you should do is find one of those guys, like Lee or whoever.
I'd love to. No,
bring them
I'd
on.
love to.
Do your, you know, when you do it, let those guys tell, you know,
100%.
tell the story too, because they'll see it from the other optic.
No, I'd love to even like. I'm always curious now of like what type of like was I a hard person, especially when I was like young. Like I feel like I was super gun ho and like super wanting to take on opportunity, but I was probably also like that, like high output but a little bit high drag too. I wonder if I was a high maintenance employee, if that makes any sense.
No, I
so
mean,
I'd love to have that conversation with them, for sure.
Well, we were all a hot mess. We all started from somewhere, right? So let me bring this home, since this has been, I feel like I know a lot more about you, and not only that, but it explains a lot of the things about how you're wired. But I always ask a couple questions at the end of every podcast, right? My first one is like, what do you tell people you do for a living?
I tell them I get to have a blast designing and building data centers. And I usually get the what's data centers, but that's what I do.
So when they say, what's a data center, what do you say?
You know, honestly, it's a big box with a whole bunch of computers that run everything that we do.
You're going to have to work on your shit, man.
That's not a good sales pitch.
Hey, listen, no, it's a really hard question to answer. That's why I've only had a few people answer that question in a way that we really broke it down and made it really simple for us to go talk to those people that your podcast is going to touch schools, which is going to touch young minds.
But they have no idea, yeah.
And mine is touching military bases, which are hitting these various commands, right? But data centers aren't a part of their. Have you ever walked into the mall and saw a person wearing a hat or a T-shirt that had anything that said data center
Never.
on it?
No, you're a good point.
Well, you will, because like I started what's called Data Center Savage, which will launch but it'll be all of, like, I want people to be proud about this industry. We'll have industry swag for it that'll have cool artwork.
That's cool.
You'll want to wear those.
Kind of like the one you're wearing now.
Well, listen, I got all the swag in the world you want, but my thing is, looking back, what would be the advice that I have two questions for you since you're unique. If you could have reached Alfonso back in his junior or senior year in high school, what would you have told him about our industry to convince that person to want to come over here?
Honestly, that like this industry is meant for, if you're willing to work, if you're willing to grind, it doesn't matter where you come in, just go in head first and don't look back. Like
I think that a lot of people,
and I got really lucky. Think about it. My first job out of college was a data center.
Yeah.
I didn't stumble into the industry a couple years in. Like I just was at the right place at the right time and incredibly lucky where I knew nothing else. And I knew from the beginning I didn't want to go anywhere else.
Me too. Once I found this industry, I'm like, I tell people all the time, like once you're in, you'll never get out.
You never want to get out, 100%.
There's just too much opportunity for growth. And the industry as a whole is growing better than every other industry because of us, the consumer. All right. Well, I guess the last question would be, what advice do you have for anybody that's listening, right? I mean, that's more of the advice for the person that's listening, but if you were to speak to Alfonso himself, would the advice have been different? Like, go to the operator side first?
Honestly, no.
You've worked all three sides. There's only three pockets.
Ecosystem,
operator, enterprise.
Sounds crazy. I would have, if I could talk to myself and give myself advice, I think I would have done the military route for at least 4 years. I think that's one of the biggest regrets that I have. I just have such an utmost respect for people that have served, that I think I would have done that, first of all. But I mean, from a tactical, I don't know, I think I would have probably got my PE. Like when I was doing engineering, I didn't even take my FE. So the first test that you take, and then it's the easiest to take right out of undergrad so that you can take your PE. I didn't even take the FE because I was going to be an intellectual property lawyer and I didn't need it.
Oh yeah.
I would have told myself to take that a little more serious, because if I would have been in EIT, I think I've worked with enough PEs that probably would have helped me sit for the test. And so that's probably one of the biggest regrets I didn't do. I would have maybe have finished law school. I think I regret not finishing. I think that's why I ended up going back and getting my master's degree while I was working, because I think I had this whole, like, I dropped out and
You had to finish something.
I had to finish something. So I did that.
I got it.
But I think it's honestly just continue to do what you do, and like there is a path here. Like,
oh, there's
I
there's
didn't
a lot
know.
of opportunity in
Like
this
I
space.
honestly felt like I was walking down kind of like an uncharted territory where like I knew this was the path that I was on, and I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, and I just had to have faith that it was going to be worth it. You know.
Well, I mean, you start off in the beauty about the industry is once you get in, if you discover that that's not what you want to do in the long term, you use it as a stepping stone to get to the next opportunity in this industry, and people will embrace that, right? So, well, that's awesome, man. And is there anything else that you want to share with any of the people that are listening that, like, if they wanted to reach out to you, how would they even reach you?
So obviously I'm on LinkedIn. I think you'll probably connect my post, my profile to when you post this. Just reach out. Like, it's been interesting. Like, I've just started to get people reach out with the whole intent of like, hey, I'd really love for you to mentor me. And I've never had anybody straight out ask me that question until just maybe the last year or two. I've always mentored people, but it's been like kind of how people mentored me. Like, I don't think like with Joel and Leon and Paul and Scott, I don't think I ever had the whole formal like, hey, will you be my mentor? Like, it was just something that they did that because either they were a manager or they were somebody in a senior position that gave me advice. But just recently I started having people reach out and were like, hey, I would love to mentor. I would love for you to mentor me. And like, it's had me sit down and figure out like, how do I mentor somebody in a formal process?
So it's really surprising to me, and I'll tell you why, right? So, and I'm not going to ever speak for guys like LD or any of that shit, but like, I think that maybe you think that people want you to mentor them because you know so much about data centers, but I don't think that's probably why. I think it's because, yes, you know shit tons about how to fucking build and operate and deliver data centers, but I think that you radiate a very high level of selflessness, which makes it very easy. I mean, you're obviously a pretty high empath. You know, you care about people. I think they get that, and that transcends into great leadership. And I think that that's probably the reason why they want that mentorship. I think as a byproduct of that, they get to learn professional acumen and an industry, like from a vernacular or like a theoretical perspective as well as a realistic one, you know? So don't underestimate those impacts that you already have made on people.
100%. I guess my point is like, I feel hopefully if anybody wants to reach out, they feel comfortable.
Hopefully they do now.
They do reaching out. And like, I am more than happy to have that conversation. Like, I did it to a complete stranger. I remember I reached out to Oz when he was at Microsoft.
Oh, wow.
And like, I didn't know him at all, and I just sent them a LinkedIn message like, "Hey, man."
Was
like,
he cool? Did he respond?
Yeah, incredibly cool. Like,
most of those guys are at that level. They're
like, I love to connect. Like,
sure.
I saw your resume. You're doing. At the time, I was still with Google. He's like, it looks like you're doing great things at Google. We're in the industry, and like, happy to chat.
Yeah,
and like, just completely
pretty surprising how approachable everybody is.
And so, like, I think about how I felt sending that message. A little intimidating because of who role that he's in,
of course.
Kind of how long he's been in. He's Oz.
He's Oz.
He's in the industry. People know him as Oz. So it's the same thing. Like, hopefully if anybody wants to reach out, they feel comfortable. In this industry, it's like 80% about the people, 20% about the business, man. Like, it really is a people-driven industry. And like, that's, if you learn anything, it's you never want to burn a bridge, and you always want to be the helping hand. Like, I can't tell you how many people, why they're like, you'll meet that you'll eventually work for or with. It's just that things can change overnight, man.
The best advice I got in the earliest stage of my career, and then is Peter Gross gave me advice when I was even a bigger nobody, and it was, be careful the toes you step on today in this industry, because they're going to be connected to the ass you're kissing tomorrow.
100%.
Because everybody does change, right? So, and you could bounce back and forth from the ecosystem to the operator to the enterprise. Like, you need real relationships with real people, right? So anyways, listen, thank
you for having me.
Thanks for coming, and I want to help when you do your own podcast. Let me know what I can do to contribute to get it promoted and launched.
100%. So I obviously have a lot of questions I want to chat afterwards about how the setup here works, and if eventually, I love you. Have a perfect story for ex-military coming out, and
I'd love to do. I'd be honored.
I'd love to switch places.
You know, I've had a few people that are like, "Why can't someone interview you?" And I'm like, "I don't know how I'd handle that."
I think that'd be fantastic. By the way,
well, Jesse's pushing pretty hard to give an interview, so I just don't know if I'm as prepared to be on that seat than this seat. You know?
I think you have an amazing story.
Well, listen, man, I'm just humbled to have friends like you guys, and it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I'm hoping everybody else gained a lot from this, and dude, it was great to hang out and spend some time with you.
I appreciate the time, man. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.